Hey guys, welcome to a new video. Like, comment and subscribe if you enjoy. Without any further interruptions, enjoy the What If. Chapter 21. Necessary Evil. Rukia was on the verge of panicking right now. Then again, who wouldn't be if that person was being chased by an insane skeletal hollow who only had to breathe on you from a distance to rot away your flesh and bone? If it weren't for Hachi putting up barriers left and right, Rukia knew she'd surely be dead by now. Please, hold him still. My attacks are dances for a reason, it takes a moment to set them up. Get him trapped, if only for a moment. Rukia called out desperately, a plan formulating in her head. The large wizard clapped his hands together, murmuring under his breath as he materialized 4 barriers, which quickly closed into a box around Baragan, who simply filled the box with his respira, breaking it down rapidly. You've only got seconds before it breaks. Buying time for an attack. HMPH. Against me, buying time is like spitting in the face of Kami. Useless, and ultimately makes things worse for you. Harabel, use your Cascada. Even as the Arankar responded, Rukia Shunpo-ed over to the opposite side of Baragan from the water using Ex-Espada. Tsugi no Mai, Hakurin. The barriers broke a mere instant before the pair of ice and water attacks could connect, but in that instant Baragan vanished into Sonido, evading the attack and going after Hachigan, who promptly put up enormous, nigh unbreakable barriers. Do you really think you can stop me, the Lord of Hueco Mundo? Suddenly a trio of ice dragons erupted out of seemingly nowhere and forced Baragan to slice them down with his axe. You're not in Hueco Mundo anymore, a familiar voice stated calmly. Rukia spun around and damn near passed out in relief. Hitsugaya Taicho had returned, fully healed, in Bankai, standing on the roof of a nearby building. But then she saw someone else next to him. Orihime, why are you here? She Shunpo-ed down, ready to carry her friend away from the mortal danger. Let's get out of here. No, here is where I'm needed, Inoue replied quietly. You'll get killed, Rukia argued, eyes wide and pleading. Do you know the true nature of my powers? The Shinigami was thrown off by Inoue's tone. Her usual kindly voice, reflective of her gentle spirit, had just the hint of steel in her words. Even so, she responded. Not really, I know you're a healer though. Of all things, she didn't expect Inoue to shake her head, negating the assertion. No, that's just what I use them for most of the time. Like Kido can be used for healing, binding or destruction, my powers have different uses. Now please, Rukia-chan, I need to concentrate. Hitsugaya-kun has explained what Baragan can do, and I need to focus to counter him. Rukia could only step back and stare at her friend. How did she grow so much? She's so confident she can finish him, but she only got her powers a year ago. She shook her head. Rukia had to admit she didn't know the details of Inoue's powers. It was entirely possible that she had somehow been blessed with a power capable of countering Baragan's hellish mastery of time dilation and his lethal respira. She stepped back a little further, Sota no Shirayuki at the ready, just in case. You've returned. I admit I thought you had run, but I see you lack even the most basic of wisdom and primal instinct of self-preservation, Baragan taunted in an observatory tone. Do you think you can trap me again? Oh, I'm sure I could, Hitsugaya told him coolly. However, not only would it kill some of the people in the area, but it would not rid our world of you forever. It might be days, it might be years, but you'd return thanks to your time dilation powers. By inverting it, years could pass for the world around you, but only minutes or hours for you. Baragan laughed. Oh, so the ant shows some intelligence. So, now that you see the inevitability of death, just what is your plan for defeating me? I won't be the one to defeat you. She will. Hitsugaya indicated Inoue on the building, who was staring up at Baragan with eyes devoid of fear. There was a pause. A human, you dare to think a human, a flea to the smallest of Shinigami ants, could harm me, let alone defeat me. I know she can, Hitsugaya said with a small smile. Go ahead, try to kill her. I won't stop you. Hachigan looked at him incredulously. Are you insane? She's only human. She may be human, but she's far stronger than you think, came the response. Let her show you what she can do. Trust me. Baragan laughed. Oh, now you've caught my interest. Very well, your death has been delayed. Let's see what this oh-so-mighty human can do against my Respira. He turned to face Inoue and let loose his rotting breath, waiting with interest to see how the weak human would react. Will she flee before my might? Put up some useless shield. Just stand and die. Orihime. Rukia screamed, taking her arm and about to shunpo, only to have Inoue roughly pull her arm away. Rukia-chan, watch me. I am no longer as weak as I was. Inoue focused hard, glaring determinedly at the deadly visage of Baragan's Resurrection as the Respira rushed towards her. She took a deep breath and steadied her resolve, focusing on her power. This would be the biggest feat she'd yet attempted with it, but she knew in her heart she could do it. She had to. Santen Keshun, she called out, throwing her arms in front of her as if to brace herself and her shield. I reject. An enormous triangular barrier materialized in front of her, spanning several blocks and reaching high into the sky. The Respira rushed it, impacted, but impossible. Baragan roared as even after several seconds, the shield showed no signs of growing weaker. Why won't your shield rot? All things made by mortals are susceptible to time. Even Kido falls before me. This is my power, Inoue announced to the awed eyes of her audience. You may be able to rot away flesh, bone and sinew. You may be able to decompose earth and metal and even dissipate Reiatsu. But my technique is based on none of those, nothing but the eternal force of my will to protect. This is my power, Baragan, Lord of Hueco Mundo. This power that intrudes on Kami's territory. The power to reject and reshape reality. And I reject you and your power. Tsubaki. Koden Zanshin. I reject. The fairy practically erupted from her hairpin, resting momentarily in front of her hands as he generated a thin rejection barrier above and below him, forming an edge as sharp as Inoue's resolve. It launched at her opponent almost too fast for her eyes, accustomed to watching Ichigo's Bankai, to follow. Tsubaki slipped right through her Santen Keshun as though it weren't there, and continued to punch through the Respira without any signs of slowing or weakening. Baragan quickly drew his axe and brought it down on the fairy, but suddenly, the Koden Zanshin had changed directions and was attacking from behind. To the Time Lord's disgruntlement, the attack seemed completely unaffected by his time dilation. Instead of paying attention to the pest attacking him, he Sonito-ed directly to the barrier and slammed his axe against it. It cracked, giving him heart as he attacked it again and again, making the cracks longer and wider. Inoue began to falter. Keeping up her shield and the attack was exhausting her quickly. The extreme mental focus it required was beginning to give her a headache, and her Reiatsu was draining at an alarming rate. But then she started feeling better, and saw that Rukia was using a healing Kido on her. But, I'm not injured? She asked confusedly. Healing Kido works by restoring the patient's Reiatsu first, so the healing of the body can be aided more quickly, Rukia explained. I'm restoring your Reiatsu, now finish him while I keep you going. Right, Inoue nodded firmly, turning her full attention back to Baragan. With some focus, the shield's cracks repaired themselves, becoming as good as new as Tsubaki continued to terrorize the Segunda Espada. Baragan was understandably outraged that he couldn't seem to harm a measly human. How can a human wield such a terrifying power? He screamed. No one can defy a kami. Maybe, but you are no kami. Soden Keshun. Rukia immediately recognized it as Inoue's healing technique, and wondered just what she was up to, but was too occupied with keeping Inoue's Reiatsu levels up to ask. In response, Baragan let loose another Respira, except to suddenly find himself, and all his Respira, surrounded in a golden barrier. Seeing him trapped, Inoue called back her Koden Zanshin and Santen Keshun, knowing she'd need all her Reiatsu and focus now to do what needed to be done. She had refused to show it, but the enemy had even more terrifying Reiatsu than Ichigo's mask. Hachigen took the opportunity to throw several barriers around the Soden Keshun as a precautionary measure in case Inoue's tactic, whatever it was, failed. Then he joined Rukia in the healing Kido, feeling that the younger Shinigami was almost completely drained. Harabel and Hitsugaya leapt down to join them, with Inoue at the front. She looked up at Baragan with kind eyes. It's very sad what I'm going to have to do to you now, you know. I've never done it to anyone, and it seems far too cruel a punishment for almost anyone save Aizen himself. But, in order to protect my friends, I've learned that sometimes I have to make sacrifices. She closed her eyes. Even if those sacrifices haunt me for the rest of my life. Soden Kishun, I reject. Suddenly knowing what was going to happen to him, fear gripped Baragan for the first time in longer than he could remember. He poured all his power into his Respira and slammed his battle axe into the Soden Kishun over and over again, trying his best to break it to no avail. He even gathered and fired his most powerful Sero. But Baragan could feel his Reiatsu fading away faster than he was spending it. No, you can't do this to me. Inoue said nothing, but kept her eyes in focus on the weakening Espada. I'm a kami, the kami of Hawako Mundo. You can't just erase me. But the truth was staring him in the face even now. Before his very eyes, the tip of his battle axe had just evaporated, as though it had turned to ash and been whisked away by the wind. I won't be defeated by a human. An ant, a mere insect to my might. Did you know, Baragan, Inoue whispered. Even insects like me can bring down the mightiest of monsters. The axe was now almost completely gone. Baragan had only one last card to play in his pursuit to survive. You do realize that erasing me will erase all the souls that I've eaten, right human? How does it feel to be completely destroying the thousands, perhaps millions of souls that make up my power? They'll be fine. I'm not rejecting them, I'm rejecting you. I'm rejecting the soul that holds them all captive, the being that wouldn't think twice about killing me or my friends. As soon as you're gone, my will directs that they'll go to Soul Society and rejoin the cycle of rebirth. That was it. There was nothing left that he could do. He'd tried everything. Baragan had to admit that he was done. He would not live past the next few minutes. So he nodded his head regally. It seems I've been bested. It hurts my pride to admit that a human, one lowly human could defeat me, but I was never facing a human at all, was I? He turned his eyeless sockets at Inoue, seeming as though he could stare into her soul as his extremities began fading. Regardless of your form, I was facing a kami, someone whose powers transcend that of Shinigami and Hollow, or even that of Vizard and Arankar. From one kami to another, beware the machinations and betrayals of mortals. His limbs were completely gone, and his torso was going the same way. They will try to enslave you to use your powers, or kill you for the threat you pose. Now only his head was left, and it was evaporating quickly. Guard yourself well, young kami. And with that, he was gone. Inoue took a deep breath and released her Soden Kishun, returning her fairies to her hairpins. She turned around, facing her friends with a troubled, preoccupied look on her face. Well, that's done, you all should go help with Aizen. I'll stay with you. My powers are a bit superfluous when compared against Hitsugaya Taicho's, Rukia volunteered. The others nodded their assent, though each of them gave a respectful nod to Inoue as well. As soon as they were gone, she turned to Rukia. Could you please bring us down to the ground? With all the fights going on, I'd rather not be on something that could collapse any minute. Rukia smiled, bringing them down easily. Sitting on a nearby bench that had miraculously never been touched by the Respira that Baragan had been throwing out so frequently, silence reigned for a minute. Rukia, who was used to Inoue happily jabbering about anything that crossed her mind, grew increasingly worried, and she glanced at Inoue's downcast expression. What's eating you? Inoue quickly glanced around, as though checking if she were actually being eaten by something. When she realized what Rukia meant, she smiled sadly, though her eyes were slowly watering. Do you know what I just did? You defeated and killed someone that even the combined forces of Shinigami and Arankar couldn't, the short Shinigami replied as though it should have been obvious. I didn't kill him. Now real tears were slowly trailing down Inoue's cheeks. Killing him would be bad enough. I'm a pacifist, Rukia-chan. I hate fighting. I hate it when people get hurt. I never wanted to kill anyone in this war, except for that one time when Yami nearly killed Sato-kun. When people die, then they go on to the next step of reincarnation, right? Humans and hollows get purified and move on to Soul Society. People in Soul Society die and get reborn in the living world, right? When Rukia nodded an affirmative, Inoue burst into sobs against Rukia's shoulder. I was so happy when I found that out. Because I knew I'd see my brother again someday. Do you know what it's like for a human to know, absolutely know with proof that there's an afterlife? That there's never truly an end, just another beginning. It's such a relief, and it brings hope to those who've lost someone that maybe, just maybe, they'll be able to find each other again. Rukia nodded as she held her friend. She could understand that, though she'd been very young when she died, so she wouldn't know from experience. She decided not to remind Inoue of the fact that souls could meet a permanent end if they were killed by a Quincy arrow. Inoue's problem came first. But that soul probably didn't do anything to deserve becoming a hollow. That soul didn't do anything to deserve being twisted into a mockery of its old self with a hunger for other souls. That soul beneath the hollow didn't do anything to deserve being erased completely from existence. That soul will never get to see its loved ones, will never be reincarnated, will never again feel all the joys and agonies of life. Because of me, what gave me the right to play kami with people's very souls? Now Rukia knew what Inoue was going through, and now that she understood, she was a little horrified too. She'd watched Baragan fade from reality piece by piece, his last words being a warning of all things to the woman who'd destroyed him. Inoue needed someone who could understand. Rukia revoked her previous decision not to speak about the Quincy. Orihime, you're not the first to have done this, you know. Huh, there's someone else who's had these powers. Not exactly, but there's someone else you know quite well whose powers also destroy hollows without giving them a chance at reincarnation. Ishida or you? What? Inoue gasped. He's one of the last Quincy. There's a reason there aren't many left. Orihime, there was a war, a terrible war between the Quincy and the Shinigami, because the Quincy, when they slay a hollow with their arrows, the souls that made up that hollow cease to exist. Shit. Akaku lunged to the side, narrowly escaping being skewered. He had quickly learned the devastating power of Jin's Bankai by receiving a cut to his arm before deflecting it with one of his own weapons, and for the first time Akaku wished his own Bankai had better defensive properties. He didn't want to die to this bastard. He swung down with his right arm, attempting to break Kamishini no Yari with the oversized monk's spade, only to be frustrated as his target retracted long before he could connect. This isn't good, I'm being outmaneuvered, he muttered. I'm just not fast enough. He didn't have to glance at the center blade floating behind him to know that the faded red dragon crest was filling more slowly than usual due to the lack of injuries on either party. Ryuman Hozukimaru was highly unusual for a Bankai. Aside from the standard increase in power, it didn't provide any special abilities or defensive properties. Also, it wasn't at full power immediately after releasing, unlike for instance Ichigo and Tensa Zangetsu. No, Ryuman Hozukimaru's power was reflected by the red dragon crest on the center axe blade. The more blood was shed on either side, the more the Bankai would wake up and grow more powerful. As a result, Akaku had a catch-22 on his hands. He couldn't hit Jin to increase his Bankai's power, and he couldn't hit Jin until he had increased his Bankai's power. He couldn't afford to let himself get stabbed and cut in half by the apparently infinitely extending Kamishini no Yari, so letting himself get hurt was not an option. He couldn't get a moment to himself to spin the entire Bankai by the center handle, which was the only other way he knew of to quickly increase the power. And maintaining his Bankai was draining his Reiatsu quickly, too quickly to last for the several minutes it would take for his Bankai to gain a significant amount more power. When he lost Bankai, I'll die, that's for damn sure. Normally, Akaku had no problems with fighting to the death as long as he could keep his pride. His number one rule was to always fight one-on-one. Rule number 2 was to serve under Kenpachi until his death. Anything that compromised one of those conditions was unacceptable, and as a result Akaku had hidden his Bankai so he wouldn't get promoted out of Kenpachi's division. However, Akaku had released his Bankai in public because he'd recognized that the alternative, not unleashing it and possibly resulting in Aizen's success, was by far a worse conclusion. Under the same reasoning, shouldn't he swallow his pride for this one fight and see if Yumashika would help? The man was broken from his musings when Jin extended Kamishini no Yari and attempted to take Akaku's legs off with a horizontal swipe. Jumping over the blade, Akaku rushed at his opponent, only to be surprised when the man had nigh instantly shortened Kamishini no Yari to the length of a short sword, re-aimed at Akaku's torso, and fired. Akaku twisted, receiving a gash to his chest instead of being killed, but kept running at Jin, hoping that an up-close attack would keep the traitor from being able to use his Bankai effectively. "You're too slow, Akaku-kun," Jin told him with a smile, merely shunpoing a distance away and getting into position to spear him through once again. The 11th Division member grimaced. I hate having to resort to this. He vanished in the telltale flicker of Shunpo, much to Jin's surprise, and reappeared right behind him, oversized blade already in mid-swing. Jin's surprise at seeing Akaku able and willing to use Shunpo, a practice that most of the 11th Division considered too close to Kido to use, worked in concert with his previous injuries from Ichigo and kept him from being able to block effectively. Even so, he managed to leap out of the way enough to keep from losing his arm, only gaining another deep gash in his side. Cursing under his breath, Jin evaded the follow-up swing, twisting as he did so just enough to be able to block the next attack. To his horror, Kamishini no Yari cracked a little more under the pure offensive nature of Akaku's Bankai. Akaku grinned. He'd landed a hit, and the Crimson Dragon mark on his Bankai had filled significantly higher due to the severity of the wound. He pressed his advantage, striking again and again, keeping Jin on the defensive, never able to properly point his Kamishini no Yari at him. Akaku's grin faltered slightly, however, he didn't have much Reiatsu left. I need to finish this fast. You're better than I thought, Jin admitted, resorting to several successive Shunpo in order to get some distance between them. It worked, as Akaku's distaste for the technique had kept him from practicing it enough to keep up with the ex-Taicho. But you're getting slower, and your movement's predictable. Your Bankai focuses on pure attack power, and it seems that it gets stronger the more that crest of yours fills. Too bad you won't be able to maintain it much longer. You're right, Akaku agreed, breathing heavily. I've only got enough Reiatsu left for one more assault, one more with full power. He rushed at Jin and slashed with all his power. Jin stood still until the very last moment, but then Shunpo-ed out of the way, a distance behind Akaku now. Tisk, tisk, Akaku-kun, ya know I'm not part of the 11th Division, so I'm not obligated to fight your way, and my part in this story isn't over yet. Do me a favor though, and don't die. I'm interested in seeing how you turn out. He vanished once more into high speed, escaping and presumably making his way over to Aizen. Fuck, the exhausted member of the 11th Division cried out, even as his Bankai deteriorated and returned to Shikai state. Yumashika was suddenly there as Akaku collapsed, holding him up. I'm too weak. Well, now that you've revealed your Bankai, after this is all over you can ask Kenpachi to help you train with it, Yumashika reasoned. Yeah, Akaku looked down at Hozukimaru in his hands. Yeah, maybe I will. The sky of Karakura was engulfed in black and red Reiatsu in the shape of an enormous crescent, its power focused on the point of contact between Aizen and Ichigo. Watching carefully from a distance, waiting for his chance to finish things, Yamamoto was astounded at the raw power of that single strike. Moon Fang Piercer of Heaven indeed. Is this it? He did not dare to hope. Ichigo's Ijuka's mask kept all expression hidden as Aizen was revealed, horribly injured. Aizen's clothes had almost completely been burned away, only covered from his waist down in tattered remnants. His back had been cut so deeply and widely that Aizen's spine was exposed, though it hadn't been cut. But before Ichigo's very eyes, the wound was healing. High-speed regeneration, he observed. Behind the mask, he broke out into an insane grin reminiscent of Cazador's. Let's test its limits then. But before he could once again strike Aizen down, the traitor Shunpo-ed away, facing the Vizard. No, do you honestly think that I would make myself a hollow? He indicated his stomach, where Ichigo could now see a jewel of some sort, which pulsed softly. The Hogyoku. Yes, I am the Hogyoku's master, and by implanting it within me, it protects its host with its own brand of regeneration, among other things, Aizen explained with a knowing smirk. Whatever, hollow or Hogyoku, you got the regeneration. I wonder how much pain I can put you through before I kill you. With that, Ichigo was once again dashing at Aizen, who prepared for another brutal assault. However, Ichigo flickered into an ungodly fast Shunpo, pushing himself harder as he attempted to use a move he'd only seen once, and that one time was used against him. He appeared behind Aizen and attempted to stab backwards to pierce the traitor's soul sleep to rob him of all spiritual energy, permanently. However, Tensa Zangetsu hit a barrier, and Ichigo had to use Shunpo again to evade Aizen's counter-swipe. Another barrier. One would think that you'd expected to be caught off guard. I do try to account for every possibility, and one of them was that Kuchiki Byakuya would be here. Senka is one of his favorite techniques, and the soul sleep is a very critical point. A barrier seemed prudent, Aizen explained with a small smile. Ichigo cackled insanely as he swung his white Tensa Zangetsu against Kyoka Suigetsu, and he brought his masked face mere inches from Aizen's nose as he pressed all his weight against his blade. Unbeknownst to the entirely too calm trader, Ichigo channeled more of his Reiatsu to his black Tensa Zangetsu, and with a motion hidden by his body, swung his obsidian Zanpakuto around the both of them with a chain, tying them both together, sword against sword but otherwise completely pressed against each other. Abruptly, the ivory Bankai flared up with another Getsuga at the ready, pushing even harder against Kyoka Suigetsu. Aizen's eyes widened. It didn't take a genius to know what was going to happen next. He could swear that Ichigo's mask, only inches from his own face, had impossibly widened its grin. Worse, he had no way to evade. The only thing he could do was put his faith in the Hogyoku's regenerative abilities, and perform a self-damaging technique as well. Getsuga, Tensho, Hado 90, Kurohitsugi. Given how Ichigo had not been able to swing, the Getsuga had a different effect than usual. Instead of manifesting as an enormous black, raging crescent attack, it appeared as a bubble-like technique, encompassing them both and growing ever larger. Abruptly, in the middle of the bubble, a large box appeared and black Reiatsu swords promptly pushed their way inside. When the techniques faded, both of them were very badly hurt and several meters apart. Ichigo's left arm hung uselessly from his shoulder, blood running down it, while Aizen himself had suffered more normally crippling gashes to his chest and waist. Both also had several minor wounds all across their bodies, and the top part of Ichigo's Bankai coat had been largely obliterated, leaving him in tattered leggings and scraps on his right shoulder. Aizen's outfit had also been destroyed further. He barely had enough to cover his modesty. But to both fighters' frustration, their opponents were regenerating quickly. The Hogyoku was taking care of Aizen, while Ichigo pumped more and more hollow power throughout his body, focusing mostly on his shoulder. He couldn't afford any crippling wounds. Now, Yamamoto roared from the sidelines. This was the Gote 13's chance to rid Soul Society of both threats at once. Bankai, Jakuho Reikoben, Soifun screamed, having completed her preparations. Her body was tethered to the building she stood upon using what appeared to be a heavy steel sash. Her Zanpakuto turned into what seemed to be an enormous missile launcher melded to her right arm, twice as tall as she herself was, with half a face guard for the right side of her face. The face guard also had slits which were to be used as crosshairs to aim properly, which she promptly used, hauling the massive weapon up and taking but a moment to aim. And then she fired. Aizen and Ichigo froze, each having been about to continue their fight despite not being completely healed. They looked in Soifun's direction in unison, and saw an enormous missile heading straight for them. Understanding blossomed in Aizen's eyes. The enormous power of a Taicho's Bankai condensed into a single explosive attack. No wonder I've never seen her Bankai before. He couldn't afford to be hit by that. Even the Hogyoku might not be able to regenerate him from that. Ichigo was not in such an analytical mood at the moment, but even in his maddened state he knew that he did not want to get hit with that. But behind the mask, he grinned. "Oh, Aizen," he sung mockingly before Shunpo-ing right behind him. Bakudo 1. Sigh. To even Ichigo's surprise, the technique worked perfectly. For only a moment, Aizen was distracted, caught by complete surprise that Ichigo could use Kido at all. With the Vizard's massive Reiatsu, awful control, and hollowified state, Aizen would have bet almost anything that even the smallest Kido would blow up in his face. On top of that, Ichigo had been a Shinigami for so little time, it was almost inconceivable that he would bother learning the tricky arts of Hado and Bakudo when his Bankai was a pure melee type. It made no sense. Why would Ichigo learn anything about Kido when in the time it would take for him to be able to use the weakest of them, he could have grown even stronger and faster physically and played to his strengths? All in all, Aizen had never anticipated that Ichigo could and would use Kido at all. But even with Aizen's distraction, it took only another moment for him to shrug off the Bakudo. While it was empowered by Ichigo's masked Bankai state, it was still only the very lowest level of Bakudo. Luckily for Ichigo, that single moment was enough. He promptly slashed at the air with some hollow Reiatsu and opened a Garganta, jumping in and closing it to evade the missile's detonation within the emptiness of the void between worlds. Aizen witnessed Ichigo's escape and cursed. The missile was almost upon him, and that Bakudo, weak though it was, had robbed him of almost all the time he had to get away. He began to shunpo as fast as he could away from the missile, which tracked him as he went. Bakudo 81. Danku. A translucent white energy barrier materialized behind him as he fled from the missile, even as the Hogyoku continued to heal his wounds. As Aizen had hoped, the missile exploded upon impact. As he had bitterly expected, the explosion was enormous, even more widespread than Kurosaki Ichigo's latest Getsuga Tensho, and almost as powerful, though it was not condensed into a single point. Aizen threw up barrier after barrier as he attempted to outrun the explosion, and one after another, each barrier was destroyed with next to no effect on the intensity due to not being completely formed yet. And then Aizen was caught in the explosion, and searing heat nearly flash-fried his arms as the concussive blast propelled him at speeds he'd never before achieved. Into and through a dozen or so buildings as he tried desperately to slow using a variation of the airwalk technique to create drag. Aizen finally managed to slow down enough to flip himself back up into an upright position, standing near the edges of Karakura as he assessed the damage. His hands and arms looked as if they'd been caught in Yamamoto's Ryujin Jaka, with second and third degree burns running up and down his arms and his hands almost blackened. Even now, though, the dead, burnt skin was flaking off and being replaced by fresh skin generated by the Hogyoku. Aizen's torso was better, suffering only mild burns, a broken rib, and several scratches thanks to the several barriers he'd cast prior to battle, though they had all been destroyed. His body was far stronger than those paltry buildings, but steel supports could be extremely sharp for mortal objects, which explained his scratches. Aizen pursed his lips. The Gote 13 was stronger than he'd anticipated, and Soifan's Bankai was unexpectedly powerful, though it was clearly evident that she hadn't practiced it, seeing as there was no second missile coming at him now. Unless I'm out of range, he mused. Well, I need to heal up a bit before I engage Yamamoto or Ichigo-kun again. His eyes widened as he felt more than heard the rip in the sky behind him, and he spun around with Kyoka Suigetsu at the ready just in time to find himself face to face once again with Kurosaki Ichigo, killing intent clearly blazing within his intense, hollow-like Reiatsu. Getsuga 10. And suddenly, the mask shattered, falling into so many pieces through the air. Aizen was easily able to take advantage of Ichigo's shock to kick him into another building. You were quite strong, Aizen complimented. I dare say if you had managed to complete that attack, you might have actually succeeded in killing me. Damn it, Ichigo screamed, his body feeling weak and heavy. I had him. How is this right? But before he could continue his thoughts, Ichigo realized that his opponent was coming at him and barely managed to block Aizen's next attack, but then he was sent flying through two skyscrapers and colliding with another. He got up quickly, searching the skies for Aizen. He's so strong. I need more power. Ichigo was completely taken by surprise when a mostly healed Aizen suddenly appeared in front of him, his right hand less than a meter away. Hado 63, Reikoho. The lightning Kido blast completely engulfed Ichigo's form for several seconds, but something began happening in the middle that began to slightly unnerve Aizen. A dark, bitter laugh echoed from within the Kido, and when it faded, Ichigo stood there, with several electrical burns on his arms and hands, but the majority of the damage had been averted by the X-guard he'd put up with both Tensei-Zangetsu, but still the man kept laughing lowly. It's not fair, he gasped out. I was so close to ending it, I was about to kill you. You who arranged for my mother's death, you who are the source of so much pain. How could I have failed to kill you when I know that you're going to sacrifice all those people for your own ambition? Why couldn't my mask have lasted for just one more second? Aizen opened his mouth to speak, but Ichigo just kept going, his words getting stronger as his voice steadied. But I won't let you do this, I can't let anyone else go through the suffering of losing a parent. Ichigo met Aizen's eyes, and the latter was surprised to see the wizard's eyes. The right eye was normal, brown iris on white sclera, but the left eye was completely hollowified, amber on black sclera. Ichigo's voice was slowly regaining the giveaway hollow echo, and Aizen could swear that Ichigo's skin was paling. But, he's not bleeding that badly anywhere, Aizen noted in confusion. What's going on? I will do anything to protect those I care about. I will ascend to the heights of heaven, or descend into the pits of hell, Ichigo vowed, not noticing how his mask was slowly materializing only on the left side of his face. Angel or demon, those titles mean nothing to me, as long as I can fulfill my desire. He didn't know how he knew the words that came to his lips unbidden. But then again, Ichigo didn't care either. All that he desired was to make the monstrous maestro of his mother's murder die. Ichigo smirked as his soul synced with the hollow within. Blackened the night, Cazador de la Luna. Time seemed to slow for everyone watching him as their realizations raced ahead of their thoughts towards the horrifying conclusion. His Zanpakuto was well known to be Zangetsu, that oversized cleaver was hard to miss. That left only one option, Resurrection. Yamamoto's expression was especially grim. A hollow with the combined powers of Bankai and Resurrection could prove a very fatal opponent. Let us hope Kurosaki Ichigo can recover, or else we will be forced to kill him. And then time resumed, with the white Tensa Zangetsu ripping itself out of Ichigo's left hand, twisting around and seeming to stab him in the chest. Except as it reached Ichigo's skin, it seemed to melt until there was nothing but the chain left, and then everything coalesced into something that every Shinigami there recognized, Ichigo's chain of fate. Then, the chain ate itself away as it had in the shattered shaft, and Ichigo threw his head back and screamed as white, foamy liquid erupted from the new hole in his chest and his own mouth. His mask grew and covered all the way around his head, twisted horns emerging as the liquid spread over his body and underneath Ichigo's Bankai. The wizard's muscles grew taut and far more defined, the skin on his hands and feet tightened and stretched as his nails grew, until they appeared more as claws and talons. From the hollow hole in Ichigo's chest came a pattern of thick crimson lines, two of which reached up and met with those on Ichigo's mask, and more that circled around his torso to meet with their brothers from the back, hidden underneath the sudden growth of Ichigo's hair that now reached down to his shoulders. The transformation seemed to take only a second, and Ichigo's scream of pain transformed into the triumphant roar of a hollow ready for battle. All the conscious wizard in Karakura blinked and turned towards where they felt Ichigo's Reiatsu become far more bestial and hollow-like. Kensai, Mashiro, Love and Rose glanced once more at the slowly dissolving corpse of Wunderweiss, then each other. The Espada-class Arrancar had been far more troublesome to deal with than they'd thought he'd be. He seemed to have a very strong hierro, could take a beating to rival Ichigo, and attacked unpredictably, resulting in Mashiro's temporary knockout. But between Kensai's Bankai and everyone else's support, plus a surprise attack from Mashiro after she'd recovered, Wunderweiss had finally gone down only a minute ago. Just to be sure, Kensai walked over warily, returning his Bankai to Shikai mode, and swiped off Wunderweiss's head. The dissolving sped up in earnest now, and in several seconds, the child Arrancar was gone. So, is that? Love asked. Yes, it's Ichigo, Kensai stated clearly. This seems to be one of the results of his deal with his inner hollow. Another one? Rose asked incredulously. First his mask felt stronger, and then that super mask. What now? Resurrection? Maybe. Love answered quietly. It's impossible to know without looking. Then let's go watch Berry Tan fight. Mashiro chirped. All four nodded, before Shunpo-ing out to do just that. Nearby, Lisa decided not to go. She was waiting for an opening on Stark in order to help her former Taicho, Hiroku Shunsui. She wasn't quite sure what kind of greeting she wanted, but Lisa needed closure. She'd been abruptly pulled away from her Taicho due to her own incompetence, she felt, and Aizen's betrayal. That she'd never gotten to say goodbye hurt to this day, and Lisa wanted to fix everything. There was no way she could rejoin Soul Society, Lisa knew this, but she wanted at least a cordial relationship with her old Taicho, and maybe with Nanao-chan. Lisa smiled softly as she remembered reading stories to the little girl who grew up to take her place as Shunsui's Fukuteicho, before her face hardened. She couldn't afford to lose her concentration. Hiyori felt the change in the air, but refused to leave her sitting position on the ground next to the unconscious Shinji, who was being patched up by Hachigen. This is all my fault, she thought deprecatingly. God damn you, Aizen. And damn me too, for not growing strong enough to do anything. How long till he's fixed? She demanded. At least another 5 minutes, Hachigen reported. Are you sure you don't want to see what Ichigo is doing? Of course I want to see what that idiot Strawberry's up to. Hiyori retorted. But, Shinji needs protection from those damned Shinigami who still see us as hollows, and you can't heal and fight at the same time. Hachigen nodded in acknowledgement before returning his full concentration to healing. However, in the back of his mind he was afraid of how the day would end. He could tell from Ichigo's Reiatsu that he was not in control. Would Aizen be defeated, only for one of their own to a mindless hollow of mass destruction? Or would Soul Society take the Vizard as a threat and wage war on them? Hachigen didn't want to relive those first few years on the run, always looking over their shoulders and fearing every shadow on the street. Please, Kurosaki Ichigo, he prayed, come back to yourself. Chapter 22, Second Thoughts. Aizen eyed his opponent critically. Resurrection. I must applaud you, Kurosaki Ichigo, but he was cut off when the hybrid was suddenly in front of him, Tensa Zangetsu already mid-swing. He barely managed a block, but was then caught off guard when his shoulder was sliced open. What trickery is this? Leaping back and trying to buy time to figure out just what had just happened, Aizen was completely caught off guard when he felt something impale him through the stomach, right next to the Hogyoku with enough force to alter his path, taking him into a building. Ichigo's new monstrous form seemed to materialize, one claw-like hand gripping what Aizen now realized was the Vizard's sword, the other quite firmly gripping Aizen's throat. Feeling blood running in small rivulets down from small punctures from where Ichigo's sharpened nails had dug into the soft tissue of his neck, Aizen realized that the word claw was perhaps more accurate than he'd first assumed. Trying to suppress a rising sense of panic, Aizen swung Kyoka Suigetsu at Ichigo's arm, hoping to buy enough time to get some distance and work out his next move, only to blocked by Tensa Zangetsu. What? Aizen asked in disbelief, blinking once, before he glanced down. It took less than a second to register that Ichigo had brutally ripped his sword out of Aizen in a diagonal fashion so he could block in time. The pain was strangely absent, though, and then it hit him hard, and Aizen couldn't help but choke up blood over Ichigo's claw that held him in place. Perhaps I shouldn't have antagonized him, the Hogyoku-infused Shinigami realized belatedly, gazing into Ichigo's masked visage, bathed in a red light. Wait, red. Aizen's eyes widened as he looked slightly up, where a Sero was quickly forming, swirling between Ichigo's horns. Aimed right at him. For a split second, time seemed to pause just long enough for Aizen to verbalize, well, shit. The Sero that erupted forcefully took Aizen out of Ichigo's grasp, leaving long scratches along his neck where Ichigo's claw had attempted to keep its grip. Sent flying once more into another few buildings that were practically vaporized by Ichigo's Sero upon impact, Aizen could feel the Hogyoku working as fast as it could to heal the wounds while strengthening his body's defense, and he reinforced that with his own Reiatsu. Breathing heavily as he managed to stop himself, Aizen suddenly realized that he no longer felt any pain, and in fact felt much stronger than before. Am I in shock? Knowing he had little time, if any, before Ichigo would chase after him, Aizen let his hand feel out where his grievous wound had been, and felt an extremely smooth surface, like glass but not as rigid. Quickly taking an assessment of the rest of his body, he realized he was covered from head to toe in the substance. Realization hit him, and Aizen smiled behind the apparent cocoon. The Hogyoku did this, as I thought, it responds to fear. To protect me against this new Ichigo, it gave me powerful armor, and is currently building its energy for the next transformation should it become necessary. Aizen was utterly unsurprised when Ichigo suddenly appeared in front of him with a sonic boom. He confidently brought his blade against Ichigo's, smiling wider behind the substance when the block completely succeeded. My turn, Ichigo-kun. Meanwhile, Ichigo opened his eyes with a start. Huh, what am I doing here? He muttered, looking around. He was in his inner world, and the sky looked very ominous, overcast with several threatening-looking clouds, drizzling lightly. Strangely, Ichigo could see neither of the spirits that usually inhabited his inner world. Cazador, Zangetsu, where are you? Heya, King. Ichigo spun around to see Cazador in his Resurrection form with an uncharacteristically serious frown on his face, which gave him a very bad feeling. What happened? Why am I in here? The Vizard asked. And where's Zangetsu? I'm not sure what happened, honestly, but I'd bet anything that it has something to do with what you did just a minute ago, Cazador replied. I couldn't tell ya. After Aizen mentioned he took action against our mother, it was raining too hard for us to see outside too well. I think I might have actually gone insane for a bit, Ichigo said slowly, trying to remember everything. It was strangely difficult, perhaps because Ichigo hadn't been fully conscious and aware of what his body was doing. I fought him at full power, Ijuka's mask, both blades. Then someone shot a missile at Aizen and I escaped with a Garganta. Reappeared, about to kill Aizen, Ijuka's mask broke. The next part one remember easier. I think the shock brought me back to some semblance of sanity. I called out a release phrase, and your name. Ichigo exclaimed in surprise. Next thing I know, I'm here. Cazador nodded. That explains the strange call on my power. You must have used resurrection, but that doesn't explain why you're here, instead of out there and fighting. I believe that I might be the best one to explain that. Both Cazador and Ichigo spun to the side, not recognizing the voice. The new speaker was clothed completely in a black, hooded garment, shielding him from the light rain. Who are you? Ichigo demanded. Zangetsu and Cazador are supposed to be the only ones here in my inner world. I am not surprised you don't recognize me, this is the first time you've entered your inner world while in Bankai. To Ichigo's shock, the figure drew Tensa Zangetsu and removed his hood, revealing himself to be a young man with long, ragged, wispy black hair that barely reached to his shoulders. Wait, hold on a minute, Ichigo said aloud with a frown. If you have that, then, are you Zangetsu? I am not Zangetsu. Ichigo, what is the name of your Bankai? Ichigo blinked, rubbing his forehead as he tried not to get a headache. So you're Tensa Zangetsu. Are you a separate entity from Zangetsu? Because if you are, my head is getting rather full. The Bankai spirit smirked in a way that immediately reminded Cazador of the ones Ichigo himself would give on occasion. I am essentially the spirit of Zangetsu at his prime and full power, just as your Bankai enables you to be at your strongest, in terms of Shinigami power. Well, nice to meet you, I think, Ichigo greeted. You think? I get the feeling that since Zangetsu never told me about you, and that you've never spoken to me before when I was in Bankai, you only make yourself known when something terrible is happening or about to happen. Not necessarily, but I can understand how you would make that assumption. What do you mean? When you are in Bankai, you are fighting someone that you could not win without it. In such a fight, the most minor of distractions could kill you, so I did not dare alert you to my presence before we had an opportunity to properly speak. Makes sense, Ichigo, Cazador admitted. Ichigo frowned, but nodded. What about the times that I've been in Bankai here in the inner world? When should I have spoken? Each time you are here and in Bankai, you are fighting for control of your body. When you won, perhaps. But you called out for my older self, Zangetsu, and I knew that any guidance that I could give, it was unlikely that you would trust. So why is Ichigo here? If he got here through meditation, we'd have known it, and Ichigo himself doesn't know why he's here, Cazador asked. Resurrection, Tensa Zangetsu answered simply. The combination of Bankai and Resurrection is extremely powerful, perhaps overly so. One of the side effects of being an Ijukas is the overwhelming hunger, especially when fighting at full power. Cazador nodded. Right, at least until sufficient Ijukas have been eaten. That weakness appears when Ichigo uses his Ijuka's mask. Are you saying that Resurrection enhanced that to the point where the king's consciousness was overwhelmed and forced here? Mostly right, Tensa Zangetsu confirmed. Ichigo did manage to impart one command that his now berserk body has registered as more important than feeding. To kill Aizen. How do I regain control? Are you sure you want to? Came the surprising response. By using Resurrection, you've created the ultimate killing machine, whose sole purpose is to end the life of Aizen Sosuke. Have you not accepted the fact that he must die, in order to safeguard not only your own existence, but that of your friends, of those you protect, of both worlds? It won't mean anything if it doesn't come from my own hand. Ichigo shouted back angrily. Why wouldn't it? Everyone you love would be protected. He killed my mother. Thunder crashed and lightning lit up the sky, the rain beginning to pick up. She was not his only murder, Tensa Zangetsu coldly reminded him, rainwater running down his face. Do you feel that Hitsugaya Toshiro does not deserve a chance for vengeance for his friend, Hinamori? Or that the Vizards should not have the opportunity to avenge themselves? Remember what you fight for, Ichigo. Ichigo's hands clenched into tight fists as he locked eyes with his Bankai spirit. He hated how much sense he made. I fight, to protect. He closed his eyes and recalled the words he spoke to Ishida all those months ago, back when Ichigo had first gained Shinigami powers thanks to Rukia. I want to protect a whole mountain load of people. Ichigo took a deep breath and opened his eyes, glad to see a subtle approval in Tensa Zangetsu's eyes. Unbeknownst to him, the rain had stopped as soon as he made his decision, and the thunderclouds were lightening, though not disappearing entirely. Aizen is a threat that cannot be merely subdued. He's too strong for that, and his ambition will drive him to sacrifice those I protect, and we can't allow that. Damn straight we can't. Cazador agreed enthusiastically, a manic grin on his face. What will you do, Ichigo? I want my body back, Ichigo decided with his eyes narrowed. It may be a killing machine, but it's operating without reason, without the ability to create plans or recognize subtle weaknesses. It may be stronger than Aizen for now, but Aizen isn't stupid. He'll figure out a way to lure it into a trap. Tensa Zangetsu, Cazador de la Luna, help me. I could cancel your resurrección, and you'd get your body back, Ichigo, Cazador said slowly, but you'll be stuck as a Shinigami, no mask, and low on power. Likewise, if I retract my powers, Cazador de la Luna will be thrown into control, but he'd be surrounded by the Gote 13, who would take him as a threat, Tensa Zangetsu offered. I dare not to that. All of us would die from a misunderstanding. Then I need the ability to retake control of my body as it is. Ichigo declared. Tell me how. The Bankai spirit's smile was almost as predatory as Cazador's could be at times, and Ichigo unconsciously took a small step back as Tensa Zangetsu brought his blade to bear. In order for you to take back your body at its strongest, you must fully embrace your nature, and demonstrate mastery of both aspects of your powers. What do you mean, embrace my nature? The wizard asked, confused. Tensa Zangetsu looked at Ichigo once again, Cazador de la Luna standing beside him. You don't understand, Ichigo, the nature of just what we are, the spirit told him. Both your hollow and I are merely parts of you, representations of your power-given personality based on your own. Ichigo blinked. Wait, just how does that make any sense? I mean, I know Zangetsu, and now you I suppose, are the source of my powers as a Shinigami. He shifted his attention to Cazador. And you're the source of my powers as a hollow. But your personalities were based off of mine. Ichigo gave a short derisive laugh. Yeah, pull the other one. Cazador has always been more bloodthirsty than me, more willing and happy to fight anyone and anything that could pose a challenge. And Zangetsu, he has always been so cool-headed, so wise, so strong and confident, and he was like a mentor to me. He listened and sympathized with my problems. He always explained things so well when I was confused. He was someone that I looked up to and could trust with anything. He was. Ichigo fell quieter in realization. He was what I always pictured as true strength. Tensa Zangetsu nodded solemnly. Zangetsu and I are based on your very soul, Ichigo. The characteristics you respected, the ones you held as synonymous with strength. Calm, wisdom, confidence, the ability to lead, intellect, prideful yet tolerant, the willingness to never give up, the desire to use strength for protection of others. Can you see it now, Ichigo? Ichigo, I once told you that I am the personality you would have had, if you had turned into a hollow that day in the shattered shaft, Cazador spoke up. And when we first made that deal, when you were convincing Hat and Clogs to let us fight, you said that hollows are creatures of instinct. Just what do you think I am? Make the damn connection, you retard. I'm your inner hollow. I'm your instinct, all the good and bad parts of it. Everyone has the buried primal instincts of when humans were but savages. The primal push to kill enemies, the need for companionship of all kinds, the fear of death, the aggression to be the greatest, the desire to prove your indomitable might, but strongest of all within you, the instinctual need to protect those you claim as your own, at any cost to yourself. Ichigo was speechless for several moments. A realization suddenly ran through his head that he felt compelled to speak, however. What does this have to do with learning and accepting my nature? The Zanpakuto looked rather irritated at the question. You have not truly accepted the truth, Ichigo. You call yourself wizard, but you have always felt that the hollow powers are Cazador's. On back to confusion, aren't they, fool? Tensa Zangetsu roared angrily. Did we not just say that both he and I are part of you? We are fragments of your very soul. The origin of all your powers, Hollow and Shinigami, lies not with us, but you. You, Kurosaki Ichigo, are human, Hollow and Shinigami. And until you can accept that, you will never know true mastery of yourself and your powers. Ichigo froze for a moment before his expression twisted angrily. I am not a Hollow. Do I look like I have a hole in my chest, or a mask? But you do have a mask, idiot. Cazador reprimanded. Don't you remember that day you asked me just what I was? Ichigo swallowed a lump that suddenly appeared in his throat. Yeah, Zangetsu's my sword, and you're my mask. He didn't want to accept it. But I'm not a Hollow. I just have Hollow powers because of what Urahara did. Have you never once thought about why Cazador's powers were so strong, so early? Why he was capable of manifesting your mask without your will to save you in your fights in Soul Society? How he could possess your body against the wielder of Senbon Sakura? Once again, Ichigo was shocked into silence. Wait, what are you saying? If you had developed artificial Hollow powers due to Urahara Kazuki, why did it manifest itself as a personality within you? Tensa Zangetsu pressed on coldly. How could the power become so strong as to overwhelm you within your Bankai state? The answer is simple, King. You've been part Hollow a lot longer than you've been a Shinigami. But that doesn't make sense. Ichigo cried out in confusion. I would have known if I were. Wait, did you say part Hollow? You were, of course, still alive when it happened, so you would never have known had you lived out your natural life, or undergone a Kanso before becoming a Shinigami, Tensa Zangetsu conceded. Remind me, Ichigo, how does a plus soul become a Hollow? Too much time being dead without being purified, Ichigo answered promptly. The chain of fate will consume itself given enough time, and the soul undergoes hollowification. Or, the soul could be partially consumed by other Hollows, like Inoue's brother. Correct. Humor me, what will keep a soul from moving on without purification from a Shinigami? Ichigo frowned pensively. Rukia had never really gone into this. Sorrow, regret, guilt, fear, too many, heavy, feelings keeping their hearts grounded to the living world. And what could cause those? Any number of things, I guess. Such as a traumatic event. Yeah, that could do it, Ichigo agreed without thinking. Then his brain caught up, and began making connections. Wait, you can't mean. Yeah, Cazador confirmed. Where did you think your increased willingness to fight and seriously injure those who annoyed you came from? Hold on, you're saying that everyone who experiences a traumatic event of some kind, or suffers from extreme depression, or anything like that, could be part Hollow? Ichigo demanded incredulously. Then why don't we have more people like Chad? Think, Ichigo. Do not rely on me for all your answers, Tensa Zangetsu replied coolly. Ichigo wasn't sure he liked the sword spirit, but did as he was told. What's the difference between normal people and Chad? Wait, normal. Most people don't have Reiatsu. He half-asked, half-stated. And without Reiatsu, no abilities can manifest. You, however, had enough Reiatsu to be able to see Hollows even from that young age. Did you never wonder where your immense Reiatsu came from? It's been building itself for years as you fought, as you interacted with spirits. The dots were connecting. Ichigo didn't want them to connect. It would mean that he'd become that which he'd feared and fought against. So you're saying that all this time, my will to fight has been enhanced by latent Hollow powers that I gained through the enormous psychological trauma from watching my mother die as a kid. And because I kept using them unconsciously, the powers got stronger until I became a Shinigami. And that's why Cazador could materialize the mask repeatedly on different parts of my body to serve as a shield for my vitals when I wasn't experienced enough to defend myself properly. And since they continued being in use, they got strong enough for Cazador to briefly take over during my fight with Byakuya. By Jove, I think he's got it, the Hollow spirit mockingly addressed Tensa Zangetsu. But I haven't become a Hollow. Ichigo insisted. I certainly don't have the desire to consume other spirits. Of course you don't. You may be Hollow, but you are no less human and Shinigami, Tensa Zangetsu replied as if that explained everything. You only gain that urge and desire when you submerge yourself into the depths of Hollow powers, for all strength comes with a price. Ichigo could not help but think, and what will the price for full control of my powers be? So how do we do this? You said I couldn't get my body back until I'd demonstrated mastery of both aspects of my powers. You will fight us together. One-on-one. Before Ichigo could demand what they meant by that, the two spirits touched, and began to merge. The wizard looked at the merging critically, trying to figure out which personality would emerge triumphant over the other. But when the resulting spirit walked out, Ichigo could not help but gasp. The spirit had Tensa Zangetsu's general appearance, black Benkai's sword, and right blue eye, but Cazador had had his own influence on the form as well. The left horn of his Ijuka's Resurreccion's mask was atop the spirit's head, directly over the hollowified left eye, and the spirit's hair was a bleached white. Tensa Zangetsu was garbed in Ichigo's Benkai coat, though the neckline of the coat held Cazador de la Luna's red frill-like tufts of hair. Come, Ichigo, the fusion spirit demanded with Tensa Zangetsu's voice, pointing his blade at Ichigo. Prove to me and yourself that you are ready to accept everything that you are and may be. Ichigo felt a flash of fear, but promptly smothered it under the weight of his determination. Fine then, if I have to beat you to get my body back, then, with his left hand, he pulled on his Jillian mask, and brought out the ivory Tensa Zangetsu he'd won from Cazador de la Luna. Let's go. At that moment, Coyote Stark coughed some blood on the ground, and the rest of the wolves he'd summoned through his resurrection faded away. It had been a hard fight, but his sheer speed and ability to manifest dual Reiatsu blades had allowed him to counter almost every attack to what were now his vitals according to the game of Irony, any part of him that was white. Neliel was just too slow to hit him, so she'd focused on eliminating the wolves that kept trying to distract her two allies. Yukatake had joined her, leaving Shunsui to fight Stark, each of them dual-wielding. To Stark's frustration, several times he'd seen Shunsui tense, as though about to do something, but then leap back and put some distance between them. He guessed that Shunsui had been about to perform a critical strike to eliminate him, but had stopped due to Neliel's pleadings to leave him alive. He almost wished that Shunsui would just kill him, that way Stark could fulfill his loyalty to Aizen, be purified and go to Soul Society, perhaps even laze around a lot more, hopefully with a few friends. Everyone would win, he figured. The Shinigami eliminate a powerful hollow, all the souls of Eden get to go to Soul Society and move on with their existence. I get what I want, my loyalty to Aizen is fulfilled, what's so wrong with wanting that? More than once, Stark had contemplated simply not blocking or countering Shunsui, to catch him off guard and finally be purified. All of his comrades but Nell were dead or traitors. But his loyalty to Aizen demanded that he give his all to defeat Aizen's enemies, so Stark fought his hardest, and was able to match Shunsui at his own game. But that had all changed as soon as the game had, as soon as Shunsui had called out, Kajioni. You've been holding back that move all this time. Sorry, but I don't control my Shikai, it's only now that she allowed me to use Kajioni. Hiraku Shunsui finished emerging from the shadows behind the man, holding the right blade of Kaden Kyokutsu inside where Stark's left lung should be. It was a non-fatal wound, but certainly enough to weaken him to the point where, with a whack from Nell's spear on the back of the Erikar's head, Stark fell unconscious, his resurrection fading quickly. With a pop of displaced air, Lilinet reappeared, also passed out. Thank you, Shinigami, Neliel whispered quietly, picking them up and laying them on the back of the horse part of her body. Wait, before you go, what's your name? Yukatake asked. You've given the two of us a lot to think about. My name is Neliel II Odelschwenk, former Espada Trace. And yourself? The chronically sick Shinigami smiled warmly at her. Yukatake Jashiro, Taicho of the 13th Division. Hiraku Shunsui, Taicho of the 8th Division. The man inclined his head, also wearing a winning smile. I'm glad to have met the two of you. I pray the rest of the Gote 13 will allow us to live in peace, but I don't have much hope for that. She looked in the direction of Ichigo's fight with Aizen wistfully. Ichigo has been so kind, I hope I get to see him again. Do you want us to give him a message? Shunsui offered. The Erinkar looked surprised. You'd do that? Thank you, she exclaimed. The pair of Shinigami Taicho exchanged looks, each wondering what it meant to be an Erinkar. Did gaining Shinigami powers affect a hollow so much? Was Neliel an example of the rule, or an exception to it? Did they still feel the need to consume other souls? There was no way to know aside from asking one or experimenting on it, and neither of them wanted to subject Neliel to Mayuri's not-so-tender mercies. This was no time to ask, either, as there was still a fight to be had. In the end, there was only one thing to say. So, what would you like us to tell Ichigo? Ichigo's berserk form warred against Aizen, Tensa Zangetsu clashing against Kyoka Suigetsu over and over at high speed, neither of them giving an inch against each other. Despite having gained his armor and increased power from the Hogyoku, Aizen was wary against letting Ichigo's blade touch him again. Unfortunately for him, Ichigo had not left him alone long enough for him to set up any traps yet. That's the trouble of fighting someone who specializes in speed, Aizen thought, frustrated as he once again brought Kyoka Suigetsu up to face Ichigo's next onslaught of high-speed attacks, twisting and contorting his body to dodge what he could, and blocking the rest. It's just a matter of time, though. I can feel the Hogyoku strengthening me, preparing my body for the next evolution. Spotting the red glow of a by now familiar Sero, Aizen frowned. He'd never expected to have so much trouble with a single human teenager, despite having put so much effort into the experiment. Hado 90. Kurohitsugi. Apparently sensing the danger, Ichigo's body vanished away in what Aizen vaguely noted was not Shunpo, but Sonito if the sonic boom was any indicator. The powerful Hado enveloped nothing but air, but it gave Aizen a valuable moment to think of a way, preferably ironic enough for Aizen's tastes, to defeat Ichigo's Berserk Benkai Resurrection blend. Berserk. There's an idea. Aizen began to focus his power into Kyoka Suigetsu as he decided what kind of illusion he needed. Ichigo-kun's never seen me release my Shikai, so I can't just have him attack someone else. I need to have someone defend me, thinking I'm Ichigo-kun. With any luck, the boy will tear apart any and everything in order to reach me. He began crafting a simple illusion in his head that Ichigo was coming at him, and that Aizen had moved to the side, resulting in their having switched positions. But despite his skill and intelligence, all Aizen had truly had was a moment or two before Ichigo was back to continue his fierce assault. He hadn't finished adding in all the necessary convincing details that were necessary to convince the Taicho of their legitimacy, the feel of wind movements, sound, even smell if that Komamura was among the watchers, before Aizen's mental picture was shattered by Ichigo actually coming at him with all unbelievable speed of a vengeance-possessed berserker, Tensa Zangetsu engulfed in a Getsuga Tensho that Aizen was sure was meant to pierce not the heavens but his own skull. Thinking quickly and trying to summon a similar enough illusion to use, Aizen attempted the sidestep that he had planned on including in his illusion, simultaneously firing a Hado 63, Reikoho. That yet again was easily dodged by his troublesome opponent. The blast hit another building, which crumbled down around them. That makes 14 buildings destroyed by us so far, Aizen noted absently. He never uses Bala like my Espada did, does he not know it? Bakudo 61, Raikujokuro. Wait, what? Aizen found himself bound by 6 rods of light stuck in his midsection, preventing him from moving. He cursed aloud, wondering who had done it, and more importantly, how to quickly get out of it before Ichigo. Too late. Ichigo had reappeared in front of him and taken full advantage of Aizen's binding to give a brutal slash to him, unleashing the Getsuga at point-blank range. However, the results were somewhat surprising. The Getsuga had come down upon Aizen's collar, where the neck met the shoulders, and had successfully managed to shatter the armor around that area. However, it seemed to have used all its energy doing so, so instead of cleaving him in two it only gave Tensa Zangetsu a chance to give a moderate cut to Aizen's neck, which promptly healed due to the power of the Hogyoku. Undeterred, Ichigo's body leapt back, charging a Sero aimed straight for Aizen's head. But before he could finish, someone knew Shunpo-ed nearby. "You're welcome for the opening, Ichigo-kun." Urahara Kazuki, Aizen greeted softly. "Welcome to the battle. You were the one who used the Bakudo, I assume." "Of course," the shopkeeper admitted freely. "It's been a long time, Aizen Sosuke, and it seems you've gone and fused with the Hogyoku." "It is not fusion. I subjugated the Hogyoku. You've lost your chance to be its master forevermore, Urahara." Urahara glared at Aizen. "Yes, it's true that I failed to master it in the past, but that is indeed in the past. Right now, you need to be dealt with." Bakudo 63, Seijo Sabaku. Aizen was suddenly surrounded by glowing yellow chains that promptly snagged his arms and tightened them to his sides. Bakudo 79, Kuyo Shibari. 8 black holes the size of Aizen's head materialized around him in the form of a circle, and suddenly a 9th appeared in Aizen's own chest. Limit of the Thousand's hands, respectful hands, unable to touch the darkness. Shooting hands unable to reflect the blue sky. The road that basks in light, the wind that ignited the embers, time that gathers when both are together, there is no need to be hesitant, obey my orders. Do you really think I'll let you finish that spell? Aizen asked, his voice not revealing any fear at all as he struggled to break the bakudo placed upon him. The chains shattered, and the rods of light trapping him in place cracked severely, but Aizen was surprised when he felt claws gripping his hands and pinning them behind his back. Ichigo's sharpened nails were digging painfully into Aizen's wrists, cracking the armor around them. Well, shit, Aizen couldn't believe he'd almost completely forgotten about Ichigo's presence. Somehow, in that berserk state, he'd still recognized Aizen as the greater threat and was instinctively keeping him from being able to stop Urahara's Kido. Worse, Aizen could feel Ichigo charging yet another Sero between his horns, held directly behind Aizen's neck. This is going to hurt. He braced himself with Reiatsu, knowing that he'd come out of the coming Kido alive, but unsure how much injury he would take in the process. I am beginning to think that I didn't think this all the way through. Light bullets, 8 bodies, 9 items, Book of Heaven, Diseased Treasure, Great Wheel, Gray Fortress Tower. Aim far away, scatter brightly and cleanly when fired. Urahara cried out triumphantly. Hado 91. Senju Koden Teiho. Several large spears of light materialized around Urahara before shooting forwards towards the bound Aizen. Struggling to free himself from Ichigo's vice-like grip and the Raikujokuro, if only to keep him there and hit by the same Kido, Aizen closed his eyes to shield them as he felt the spears hit and explode violently. At the same moment, Ichigo unleashed the Sero Blast in tandem with the explosion, firing at point-blank range. The combined shockwave ripped Ichigo away from Aizen, sending him flying, but Ichigo's body swiftly recovered and appeared on the opposite side of Aizen from him, waiting for the man to emerge from the smoke. Urahara smiled grimly as he saw the burns and tears along Ichigo's body from the impact of the spears heal quickly. High-speed regeneration is truly an incredible thing. I've been lucky that Ichigo is focusing on Aizen, rather than random destruction of everything. What's different than before? You've gotten too careless since you acquired those powers, he taunted. You never would have let me hit you before. You're right, Urahara whirled, hearing Aizen's voice directly behind him, but he knew he was too slow to react in time as Aizen slashed at his shoulder with his bare hand. In the barest of moments, he was able to observe Aizen's physical state. Aizen appeared largely unharmed from the Kido, which Urahara had expected, though his armor was cracked in a couple of places. Where Ichigo had previously shattered the armor, however, was bleeding slightly, though there was evidence that it had been bleeding far more seriously a few seconds ago, if the blood-stained armor in the surrounding area was anything to go by. Urahara couldn't tell what, if any, effect Ichigo's Sero had had on him as Aizen's back was not visible from his angle. The Hogyoku must have healed him. With a mild sonic boom of Sonido, Ichigo appeared between them, Tensa Zanjetsu wreathed in the black Reiatsu of a Getsuga as it moved to slice Aizen's hand off. To both Urahara's and Aizen's surprise, it succeeded. Taking full advantage of the opportunity, Urahara leapt forward and tapped both of Aizen's wrists before shunpoing backwards. Aizen leapt back, clutching his stump of a wrist in pain as he looked at Ichigo in shock. How can he counter the Hogyoku like this? How can he be able to inflict this much damage on me after I've gained this much power, when his body is acting and reacting purely on instinct? Just then, both arms ringed themselves to behind his back, yellow spiritual energy cuffs keeping them together. His eyes widened as he felt a vague burning sensation within him. What? It's a seal, Urahara explained, turning away and tipping his hat downward over his face. It blocks off the Reiatsu vents located in the wrists of all Shinigami. Thanks to Ichigo, they were nice and exposed for my seal. You'll be incinerated by your own Reiatsu, from the inside out. Goodbye, Aizen Sosuke. And as if his farewell was the trigger, Aizen was enveloped in a pillar of light that reached for the sky. Chapter 23, Fear. Yamamoto watched with his eyes opened as the traitorous Aizen Sosuke fought against the increasingly frighteningly powerful Kurosaki Ichigo. He was carefully watching his surroundings, analyzing the area constantly for any missing minute details, the leaves on trees being identical, for instance, or perhaps a road down below missing a few cracks. It seems Shunsui and Jashiro are done playing with their opponent, he noticed. Now, wait, why isn't their opponent dead? I can feel his Reiatsu still, but it's dropped to the point of unconsciousness. Why haven't they finished him off? Perhaps the woman who was fighting alongside them has betrayed them. Yamamoto took a moment to deliberate on whether he should send someone to check on the situation, before he decided it was not worth it. The two of them are very strong, and not unintelligent. They will be fine. Speaking of betrayals, Yamamoto reached out his senses for one of his most loyal, if relatively new, Taicho, Komamura. The canine-like Shinigami was greatly weakened, but so was his opponent, the blind Tosen Konami. Recognizing Hisagi's strong Reiatsu near, if not in, the fight, Yamamoto believed that their situation would be resolved in the Gote 13's favor as well. Only Aizen and Jin were left, then. Yamamoto Saotaicho's face darkened as he considered the two of them. At the moment, Jin seemed perfectly satisfied to watch Aizen just as the Gote 13 was. Does he believe Aizen will triumph? Yamamoto's hand twitched, the cane holding his Zanpakuto blackening a little as it was singed by his fiery Reiatsu. Relax, Saotaicho. Ichigo's doing fine. A voice said from next to him. The person this voice belonged to was the reason why Yamamoto hadn't evacuated all the Shinigami from the area as soon as Aizen had evolved, and unleashed his last resort. Flashback. Aizen had just been blasted away by Ichigo's first Sero, and Yamamoto was about to give the orders for all the available Taicho to team up against Aizen and take him out, before a very surprising figure appeared before him. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Yamamoto Saotaicho. Isshin, Yamamoto recognized. Why are you here? Dressed in the traditional robes of a Shinigami, with a captain's vest wrapped around his left sleeve, Ichigo's father chuckled. Why do you think I'm here? I'm here to help my son, as any good father should do. And why shouldn't I send my forces down to slay Aizen where he stands right now? Kurosaki Ichigo has weakened him. Look again. Yamamoto did so, and to his consternation, it seemed Aizen had fused further with the Hogyoku, gaining new strength and making it much more difficult to hurt him. The connotations made sense immediately. The fight just became that much harder, as a few of the Taicho would now be useless. Soifan's Bankai, while strong, had failed to kill Aizen before and she had weakened in firing the first shot. Komamura, when he arrived, would be fatigued and his Bankai would not pierce the new shell. Hitsugaya was very powerful, but young and his powers were still maturing. It was unlikely he would have much effect either. As Shunsui and Jashiro were occupied elsewhere, that only left Yamamoto himself. Since he was still susceptible to Aizen's hypnosis, he'd prepared a failsafe in the fake Karakura town prior to Aizen's arrival, his ultimate death trap of fire, Enetsu Jigoku. With its power, anything within the flames would be destroyed, even Yamamoto himself, and he would need to stay in order to ensure that Aizen could not escape. Yamamoto had almost cracked a smile when he realized it would also utterly destroy the remaining Arrancar in the area, sparing Soul Society another threat. Once again, he opened his mouth to give a retreat order to his troops. Soul Society would need to remain strong after he was gone, and Yamamoto would be damned if everything he'd worked for fell away after his death, but Isshin interrupted him again. Let Ichigo handle Aizen. Do you honestly think he, a human who gained his powers so recently, can defeat a highly skilled Shinigami who has practiced for centuries? He's done it before, hasn't he? Isshin quipped with a grin. 2 words. Kuchiki. Byakuya. End flashback. Do not presume to give me orders, Kurosaki Isshin. Wouldn't dream of it, but you have to agree, Ichigo's doing quite well against Aizen. If by quite well, you mean that your son has fallen into his hollow powers and has become a monster that may or may not be worse than Aizen himself, then I agree. Isshin pouted a little. You're so mean. Isshin's antics tempted the nearby Hitsugaya into staring incredulously at him instead of dutifully watching the fight. If this is the influence Kurosaki's had growing up, I think I may need to congratulate him for turning out as well as he did, he decided, before turning back just in time to see Urahara turn up and complete a textbook-perfect combination of 3 high-level Bakudo and an impressive level 91 Hado, with Ichigo helping hold Aizen in place before blasting him with a Sero of his own. Note to self. Never, ever piss off Urahara Kazuki. Or Kurosaki Ichigo for that matter. True to form, the younger Kurosaki male had utterly impressed the stoic Hitsugaya Toshiro. Gazing at the horrifying visage of Kurosaki's Resurrection mask, crooked horns aimed forward, combined with the sheer weight of his Reiatsu, which had once again jumped to absurd levels, Hitsugaya shook his head. He'd been forced, along with whoever else could breathe in such dense Reiatsu, to evacuate those who were in danger of dying simply from Ichigo's full presence to the Urahara shop, which was shielded enough to allow them to recover. As it was, Hira Fukutecho, Omeda Fukutecho, and even his own Matsumoto had been overwhelmed. To Hitsugaya's mild embarrassment, the unseated officer Kuchiki Rukia had been perfectly able to breathe, though she was understandably terrified. She and Inoue Orihime were watching from a distance as well, though judging by their expressions, Hitsugaya wasn't sure if that was a good thing. With every second that passed, he could tell that their fear was growing, though Inoue seemed to be handling it better. With good reason, Hitsugaya reminded himself. She just destroyed a veritable god of time. Rukia, however, had never witnessed just how unbelievably destructive, how undeniably hollow, how inspiring of absolute terror Kurosaki Ichigo could be. She had never crossed blades and experienced that precious glimpse into Ichigo's soul from the impact, had never seen Ichigo even pull off his mask and reassure her that he had been in complete control. Even if she had, Rukia wasn't sure that she would have been able to remain calm in the face of Ichigo's resurrection. Is this why it's forbidden to give humans Shinigami powers? What have I done? Are you scared? Came a quiet voice. Rukia whirled, surprised by the unexpected presence, to see four of the wizards she'd witnessed come to help earlier. You should be, the one with white hair continued grimly. We are wizard, and there are times that we scare ourselves. Although we've never taken our hollow powers to that level, Kensai. No, we did not trust our inner hollows enough, love. Kensai cast his gaze at Ichigo's new form, his face stern, his voice almost reminiscing in its quality. In a matter of months, he has mastered his hollow powers further than we have in a century. It makes me wonder what we could have done had we truly tried to do more than just ensure our sanity. So Ichigo is still in there? Rukia could not help but ask. Yep, Berry Tan's still in there. The unexpectedly chipper, green-haired girl confirmed happily. Don't bother, Mashiro. The Shinigami have never understood, Kensai stated darkly, turning away. What do you mean? Rukia asked, confused, but it was not Kensai who answered, but love. The Gote 13 ordered our execution after we gained hollow powers accidentally, believing that we truly became hollows rather than gaining a dangerous power that we needed to master to keep from hurting everyone around us, Love explained. Secure in their belief that they were right, they didn't bother to check it before they started teaching their ideas of what happened, so no one would question their order. What they don't understand is that we are, by our very nature, predominantly Shinigami ourselves. It's our default state, the form we return to when we're completely exhausted. Urahara stabilized us after Aizen infected us with hollow powers, and gave us the ability to fight for our sanity and win. That relieved Rukia far more than she cared to admit. So, as soon as this bottle's over, Ichigo will be able to pull off his mask and return to normal. We don't know, the last of the wizard admitted. None of us have ever achieved resurrection. Rose. Love rebuked, seeing Rukia's fears rise again. If he has trouble, all we have to do is break the mask and he'll return to normal, no problem. Just like a normal hollow, if you break the mask, you break the power. Don't worry, Rukia, Inoue murmured, catching all their attention despite her soft voice. Kurosaki-kun will be fine. Those Erankar, they were able to turn off their resurrection, right? So Ichigo should too, and then he'll be able to take off his mask as usual. Rukia managed a tiny, reassured smile as she resumed watching her human-turned-wizard friend beat the crap out of Aizen. Soifun was watching as well, but her training was failing her. I need to be looking for an opening, but even if I did, can I even do anything? Her mind flashed to when she'd used her Bankai, Jakuho Reikoben. The blast had been beautiful in a sense, spectacular and so full of fierce hope that it would finish Aizen off. But it had failed, it injured him badly, but did not kill him. It provided the perfect opening for Kurosaki, but his forbidden power failed him at the last moment. Any experienced Shinigami could have predicted that result. Forbidden powers are full of drawbacks. I swear I will come at you with all my power. Against her will, Soifin's gaze shifted to the horned hollow mask of Kurosaki's Resurrection as it fought toe-to-toe against Aizen. She'd thought that Kurosaki in his mask had been intimidating and far too hollow for any Shinigami to be. Now Soifin knew that she'd been wrong. This culmination of Shinigami and hollow, this monstrosity, this is Kurosaki Ichigo. Surely everyone now can see why he has to die. If you ever come after me or my friends, you will need Yamamoto Genryusai himself at your side to save you, because I swear I will come at you with all of my power. Soifin could not repress a shiver. After seeing this display of raw power, after hearing Kurosaki defiantly call upon his inner demon by name, she knew that if he ever decided to back up his words, Soul Society would be in flames by the end of the day. She was starting to doubt if even Yamamoto Saotaicho could stop him before Kurosaki could kill her. But that's why we need to kill him. He's a threat to Soul Society. If you ever come after me or my friends, you will need Yamamoto Genryusai himself at your side to save you, because I swear I will come at you with all of my power. Soifin resisted the urge to clutch her head in her hands, largely because Suzumaki was still released and it was likely she'd accidentally hurt herself. She had to admit it, if only to herself. She was scared. She was terrified because Kurosaki Ichigo had evolved in a way that was beyond her comprehension, because Kurosaki had proved himself ready and able to wage a war against Soul Society the likes of which would destroy almost everything in maybe all the worlds. If you ever come after me or my friends, you will need Yamamoto Genryusai himself at your side to save you, because I swear I will come at you with all of my power. Soifin was trained as an assassin from a young age in service to the Shihoin family. She was now the head of the Onimitsukido, and Taicho of Squad 2 in the Gotei 13. She knew how to recognize when one's mind was entering a cycle that would leave her unresponsive until broken out of. She'd even fallen into it before, when Yoruichi-sama had abandoned her a century ago. The fierce, heartfelt threat that Kurosaki had given her. If you ever come after me or my friends, you will need Yamamoto Genryusai himself at your side to save you, because I swear I will come at you with all of my power. Was overwhelming her with fear. Soifin knew, just as powerfully as she knew her Zanpakuto's name, that she'd be seeing Kurosaki Ichigo's Resurrection in her nightmares. But just as she was starting to get a grip and quiet her instincts, which were screaming and begging to run, Soifin's eyes locked with the soulless eye sockets in Kurosaki's mask. The eye contact only lasted for a moment, less than a second, but time seemed to slow and Soifin felt as though she were gazing into an endless darkness. I swear I will come at you with all of my power. Soifin heard it in her head so clearly that time that she felt her heart stop for what felt like an eternity, but what was probably only a second. Suddenly, she was in a thick fog, thick enough that Soifin couldn't see anything more than a dozen meters away, and while that rang warning bells in her head, she couldn't seem to think clearly enough to figure out why. Turning around, she found herself within arm's length of Kurosaki's Resurrection, which scared her to the point of screaming. Or she would have, but the enormity of Kurosaki's Reiatsu weighed too heavily on her to make a sound. She could barely breathe, let alone move, and her fear just kept rising. Then she saw the mosque's mouth begin to open. I warned you. Miraculously, the rush of adrenaline that accompanied those words let her spin around to move into a shunpo, running away, but she froze in horror as another Kurosaki Ichigo seemed to appear. She looked over her shoulder, but the first one was still there, and now both were walking towards her with their blades bared. She shunpoed in a different direction, but then a third walked out of the fog. More and more of them made their way out. She was surrounded. Each of the Kurosakis moved towards them, slowly, predatorily, Zanpakuto drawn. Harsh, hollowified whispers reached her keen ears, and Soifin struggled not to succumb to her own fear as she heard them, growing steadily louder every second. I gained this Bankai to trample on Soul Society's pride. I swear, Bankai, Tensa Zanjetsu, I will come at you. Angel or demon, those titles mean nothing to me. With all my power, blacken the night, Cazador de la Luna. As her stark terror reached new heights, Soifin's heart thundered in her ears and all else fell silent. One of Kurosaki's stepped in front of the others. Soifin, Taicho of Squad 2 of the Gotei 13. I am coming for you. Stay away from me. Soifun Shunpo ed straight upwards, the only direction she hadn't tried yet, but when she broke through the top of the fog, Kurosaki was right there, a Sero in his horns, a Getsuga in his Zanpakuto, his mouth wide open as if preparing to consume her. I swear I will come at you with all of my power. In reality, Soifun's body stiffened, eyes glazed, as her mind locked up in a terrifying illusion as strong as any Aizen could devise within her own psyche. Komamura glared up from his prone position on the ground, at the monstrous insect resurrection form of his former best friend, Tosen Konami. His Bankai's chest had been crushed from the impact of Tosen's newest hollow technique, Los Nueve Aspectos. Of course, through the link to Komamura's own body, so too was Komamura's ribs broken in several places. Tosen had grown incredibly strong, but if Komamura was seeing correctly, more than once he'd gotten a little blood in his left eye from the fight. Something was about to make a difference in the battle. Pathetic, Hisagi's voice judged harshly, plunging his sealed sword into Tosen's exposed neck from above. Sight has made you blind, Tosen. Before, you would have seen that coming and countered it without even trying. You are no longer my Taicho. Reap, Kazushini. And with a sharp sound of a scythe cutting the air, Hisagi's blade shifted into its Shikai form within Tosen's throat. Judging from the sharply dropping Reiatsu in the air, Komamura knew the fight was over. Tosen had been disabled in a spectacular fashion. A moment later, Hisagi Shunpo ed by his side. I cut his spinal cord in 3 places. He should be unable to move. But Komamura had a moment of doubt. Tosen had regenerated his arm in the darkness of his Bankai, presumably thanks to his new hollow powers. What are the limits of his regeneration? Is he really done? Leaning heavily on Hisagi for support, Komamura made his way to his old friend, who had by then released his resurrection and dispelled his mask. Tosen was back in his Shinigami form, apparently uninjured if not for the fact that he wasn't moving and was face down on the ground. Komamura, the anthropomorphic canine, was unsurprised to hear his old friend's voice. While Hisagi turned over his old Taicho, he spoke to his traitorous friend in the hopes of regaining his best friend. Tosen, try to not speak too much, your throat was damaged. Since you're breathing, I presume you've regenerated enough to do so, but don't damage yourself further trying to speak just yet. Tosen remained silent, but turned his eyes towards his best friend. You said it was destined for us to cross blades. I knew that as well, Komamura admitted. I'm sure Hisagi felt the same. But I do not want any of us to die today. Tosen looked about to say something, so Komamura quickly continued. I don't expect you to stop being angry, nor will I tell you to stop hating. You have that right. All that I ask is that you don't let revenge consume you, my friend. I do not want to lose you, like you lost your friend so long ago. To lose you would break my heart, Tosen. Tosen's face softened, an unexpected tear trailing down his face. Thank you, Komamura. Hisagi, please, come closer. I don't have my mask on, but the hollow powers remaining inside me allow me to see for just a bit longer, and I want to remember your face. Hisagi silently did as was beckoned, standing beside Komamura Taicho and gazing into Tosen's eyes. After several moments, Tosen let out a small smile of gratitude. Thank you. With that, his eyes fluttered closed, and his breathing slowed as the hybrid loosed his grip on consciousness. Komamura turned his head slightly at Hisagi. I don't believe I need to tell you what to do now, do I? Hisagi smirked in response. No, Komamura Taicho. He knelt and scooped Tosen onto his shoulder before flickering into Shunpo. Despite the no doubt pressing need for assistance against Aizen, Komamura took a moment to smile. He and Hisagi had succeeded in bringing their friend back from within the unrecognizable revenge-driven man that Tosen had become. It's strange, but I may need to thank Aizen for killing the Central 46. Their views would have demanded Tosen be killed, but perhaps I can convince Yamamoto Saotaicho to be lenient. With that hope in mind, Komamura Shunpo ed away to join the mass of Taicho, hoping to be able to help in some fashion. There were not many things that could leave Yukitake Jashiro speechless. Watching Kurosaki Ichigo, in a completely hollow form but still retaining his rather memorable Bankai, work together with Urahara to systematically demolish Aizen was something he was not quite prepared to see, however. He'd seen Ichigo pull on his mask earlier, but that mask was definitely not the same as what was on Ichigo's face now. The implication that now Ichigo had two sets of hollow powers, or that his original set had undergone an extreme evolution, potentially mid-battle, was simultaneously frightening and humbling to contemplate. Ichigo's growth rate is, no other way to put it, outrageous. It shouldn't even be possible, but in a year's time he's grown from a simple human with high spiritual awareness to this. It was like the man was born for battle. So, why aren't we doing anything? Hiraku asked his best friend with a nudge. Do you want to try to interrupt Ichigo's fight with Aizen right now? Yukatake replied back instantly, not moving his eyes from the battle. The oft-drinking Taicho took another look at the fighters before shaking his head in a negative fashion. What happened to the kid anyway? He called on his forbidden hollow powers, Yamamoto intoned, his eyes opened slightly from the slits he usually kept them at. He unleashed a resurrection, and has not spoken since. His reiatsu and movements indicate that he is not in control any longer. But he's still only going after Aizen, even when the easier target Urahara is there. Hiraku whistled lowly at that. Damn, he's a pretty interesting kid, don't ya think, Jashiro? Very. Of course he is. He's my son. Isshin jumped in. Just what is he? Ah, Komamura Taicho. Hiraku greeted. I see you. A nightmare. There was silence for a moment as everyone turned to Soifin, who was still watching Kurosaki's fight with Aizen like her life depended on it. With a flash of guilt and self-reproach, Yukatake realized that she was not far off the mark. She was a relatively new Taicho, being in the position for less than a century. Truth be told, Soifin was not an exceptionally strong Taicho when it came to fights such as this. She was an assassin at heart. She sought ways to finish the fight quickly, always improving her speed rather than strength, as her Shikai allowed her to end anyone's life with 2 strikes. If Ichigo, who was far more suited for drawn-out wars at full strength, failed, then Soifin would have to rely on himself, Shunsui and Yamamoto, who had all been exposed to Aizen's Shikai. Nothing could be guaranteed then. Of course, Soifin, being the perfect assassin, was waiting for an opportunity to stick her blade into Aizen's back. Yukatake smiled grimly. If there was nothing else he could count on Soifin to remain as cool-headed and focused on the goal as Shunsui was casual and joking. A nightmare. Wait, I get it, Hiraku spoke up. I see what she means. Well, Hitsugaya asked after a moment of silence. A human is never supposed to be given Shinigami powers, right? Hiraku pointed out, because the living aren't supposed to have the powers of the dead. And it's forbidden for a Shinigami to gain hollow powers. Not only that, but he's advanced very high on the tier in both Shinigami and hollow powers, with Bankai and Resurrection. All that power in the hands of a living human with no affiliation to any government. Can you see how hard it would be to defeat him if he ever decided we were his enemies? We would win, Yamamoto declared, his voice low, but it would likely result in high casualties. It won't happen unless you're all very stupid. Several pairs of eyes turned to Isshin, who had made that bold statement without hesitation. Ichigo has friends in Soul Society all over the Gote 13. Friends like Kuchiki Rukia and Abarai Renji. And if there is anything that you should know by now about Kurosaki Ichigo, it's that he will defy any and everything to protect his friends. Why else would he come after Kuchiki Rukia? Now stop thinking the worst of my son and watch him win. So he is not a nightmare of heaven, but of hell. Kurosaki Ichigo, Hell's Nightmare, Hiraku dubbed him jokingly, but no one was laughing. Instead, they were all watching. Aizen had just been enveloped in a column of reiatsu. Ichigo's Resurrection's grip on Tensa Zangetsu tightened as the pillar of light faded. Spotting this, Urahara smiled sadly, knowing that the fight was not yet over. Yeah, it'd be too much to hope for Aizen to be finished off from just that. Then he'd just be a regular monster. The light faded entirely, and Aizen emerged in a new, but somewhat familiar form. He appeared much as he had before the Hogyoku had transformed him, but now he had long, sleek hair that reached down his back, and his uniform had apparently regenerated with some minor changes as to where the slits in the clothes were. Intriguingly, Aizen's eyes had also changed, now being gray with purple sclera. It reminded Urahara forcefully of Ichigo's own eyes when he donned his mask, amber with black sclera. While Ichigo took on the eyes of his inner hollow, a part of Urahara wondered where the gray and purple had come from. If the Hogyoku was responsible as he suspected, was there an entity within it that Aizen was now calling on? That was a very good attempt, Aizen congratulated. If it were anyone else, this fight would be all over in your favor. Or rather, had I not implanted the Hogyoku into myself, then I would probably be dead, or powerless as my own Reiatsu burned all my power away. But as it is, the Hogyoku is beyond your understanding. Perhaps, Urahara conceded, but even if it is, that doesn't stop one thing from being true. Oh, and what's that? You've got an enraged wizard at his strongest right behind you. Aizen merely smiled as Ichigo's berserk body once more threw his head back to scream his challenge to the heavens. So I do. Come, Kurosaki Ichigo, let's see how you do now that you've helped me evolve to this state. Still watching from afar, Yamamoto's cane burned away, revealing his Zanpakuto. Evacuate the area. Isshin Shunpo ed right in front of him, pleading. You can't mean, he hasn't lost yet. Do you mean me to delay long enough for my trap to be ineffective? Yamamoto replied coldly. But my son, he may still survive. I will not hinder his leaving the vicinity, the Saotaicho promised. But I will not wait any longer. He vanished into Shunpo, and the rest of the Taicho watched Isshin's face turn cold and hard with determination until he too flickered away. Hitsugaya felt a chill run down his spine when he recognized the look. He had recently seen that look on Ichigo's own face, and he knew that the situation was about to get far more dangerous in the immediate area. Let's get everyone out of here, Kiraku commanded, his voice and face devoid of their usual joviality. Hitsugaya, you evacuate Matsumoto, Renji, Rukia, Chad and Inoue. Soifun, get Omaeda, Kira, Akaku and Yumashika, then check if anyone is at the Urahara shop and evacuate them too. Komamura, alert the wizard and then fetch Hisagi. They aided us in this battle, so the least we can do is warn them. Bring everyone to a point 5 miles north of Karakura. Jashiro and I will alert the errand car that defected from Aizen before doing a sweep of the area. Does everyone understand their orders? Go. All of them disappeared a moment later. Chapter 24, Inferno. Kurosaki Isshin was many things. To his family, he was best known as an over-the-top emotional old man who liked to fight his son at practically every given occasion, but who also had his moments as an extremely wise father. To his colleagues in the medical field, Isshin was an outstanding doctor who owned his own practice and worked closely with the owner of the nearby hospital, Ishida Rukin. But to most of the Shinigami who remembered him, Isshin was not someone to mess with, ever. The former Taicho drew his trusty Zanpakuto, Engetsu. It's been a long time, old friend. Engetsu said nothing, but Isshin could feel the blade's satisfaction at being wielded once more. Isshin smiled mirthlessly, his eyes firmly on Aizen as he charged his own Reiatsu into the blade. If only Ichigo was conscious to see this, Isshin thought with a hint of his usual humor. Come on, Ichigo, hurry up. Aizen, completely focused on his two opponents in front of him, he'd maneuvered so he could see both Urahara and Ichigo in the last few seconds, was caught off guard when Isshin Shunpo ed right behind him. In that scantest of moments between the time when Isshin appeared and when the sword struck Aizen, the traitor had begun to spin to counter, only to realize that Ichigo had taken full advantage of his distraction and was similarly swinging his own Tensa Zangetsu from point-blank range. Father and son brought their swords down in mirrored two-handed strikes, showing a strange sort of symmetry in opposites. Shinigami and Hollow, in identical positions on opposite sides of Aizen, Isshin with his blue-white aura around his blade, Ichigo with his practically seething red and black version. In that seemingly frozen moment, Urahara was in awe of the in-life metaphor for that perfect blend of Shinigami and Hollow that he dreamed of but was too afraid to try. And then the moment ended, and two voices spoke together. One a clear, strong voice, the other harsh and low. Each demanded Aizen's demise. This was the voice of the Kurosaki. Getsuga Tensho. Ichigo, meanwhile, was struggling against the combined manifestation of his powers. He thought of it as Tensa Zangetsu since he seemed to be the dominant personality, and the appearance of the fusion form seemed to far more closely resemble the Bankai spirit. Something was confusing Ichigo, however. They'd been fighting for some time now. But while Tensa Zangetsu was forcing Ichigo to fight at his limits, it was easily apparent to the wizard that Tensa Zangetsu was not fighting at his own best. Several times now, He'd stopped pursuing Ichigo just long enough for the substitute Shinigami to catch his breath or recover from an opening that provided plenty of opportunity for the hybrid spirit to strike and finish him. "Why aren't you finishing me?" Ichigo cried out after one such instance, shoving hollow Reiatsu at his latest injuries, a couple of gashes on his right arm, cracked bone on his left. "Why should I?" Tensa Zangetsu replied calmly, in a ready position should Ichigo come at him again, but not actively pursuing. "This is not your test for Bankai, where only true danger to your life would force you to improve fast enough. I am merely training you so you may be even stronger when you emerge. Enough talk, prepare yourself." Ichigo had no time to argue, instead bringing his sword to bear, blocking the spirit from inflicting a major wound to his torso. I need to win. If he could just bring out the ivory blade he'd won from Cazador de la Luna, Ichigo might be able to take advantage of Tensa Zangetsu's being focused on the current clash. But the Bankai spirit was simply too strong. Ichigo couldn't afford to block with any less than his full strength, he had to use both hands on his single sword. Fine then. Getsuga Tensho. Tensa Zangetsu was forced back into another skyscraper by the enormous Getsuga that emerged from the Bankai that Ichigo wielded, but did not falter. His eyes remained unchanged, still calm, still completely in control as Tensa Zangetsu forced the technique upwards into the sky. "The Getsuga is the technique that I give you, Ichigo. What makes you think that it would be sufficient to defeat me, when you have not even mastered it yet?" "What do you mean?" The next moment later, Ichigo brought up his weapon to defend against Tensa Zangetsu, who showed no signs of struggle behind their swords, which shuddered and fought for dominance. "The Getsuga Tensho is a compression of your energy. Tell me, Ichigo, how powerful that same blast would be if instead of being so large, it was half as large with the same amount of energy behind it." Despite being obscured behind the hollow mask he wore, Ichigo's eyes were clearly surprised to the fusion spirit. "I see you understand. Getsuga Tensho." "Oh she." Ichigo was sent flying, holding the incredibly powerful Getsuga, only the size of his own body, back with all his strength behind his Bankai sword. Ichigo winced as the Getsuga pushed him into and through two buildings, metal beams and glass stabbing into his back, before it weakened enough for Ichigo to shunt it upwards just as Tensa Zangetsu had done to his a moment ago. "Come on, Ichigo, think," he ordered himself. "Tensa Zangetsu told me I can't take control of my body until I accept that I'm hollow and Shinigami together. Then Tensa Zangetsu told me to attack him in order to prove that acceptance. Now he's telling me that he's just training me until I emerge. Is he tricking me somehow? What are you doing, Ichigo?" Ichigo spun, seeing Tensa Zangetsu standing on top of one of the many flagpoles on a nearby skyscraper, his outfit billowing impressively in the breeze. "I'm trying to work something out. How am I supposed to just accept that I'm a hollow? Worse, how am I supposed to show it? Eat a soul. I'd rather not. Of course not. Maybe I'm supposed to demonstrate some hollow powers." Ichigo quickly threw his left hand forward, holding his fingers in a familiar position as he channeled his hollow's Reiatsu to them, and felt the Reiatsu leave his fingers and start to intertwine into a red orb of destruction, growing larger. "Huh, you'd think I'd stop being surprised by how instinctively easy the hollow powers are. See, I've got a Sero. Isn't that enough proof of my acceptance?" Tensa Zangetsu's expression turned into an almost angry frown. "No, you still see it as one of Cazador de la Luna's powers. Stop trying to evade the lesson, Ichigo. You are a hollow." Ichigo shook his head violently. "I am a wizard. Then why do you always rely on your Shinigami powers?" Tensa Zangetsu demanded. "It's always Getsuga Tensho, never Sero. You never use your hollow powers unless you need to. Admit it, Ichigo. You are uncomfortable with the hollow powers because you are afraid of how easy they are, how familiar they are to you, how very natural they feel. I don't use my hollow powers because I didn't want the Gote 13 breathing down my neck about them, especially after what they did to the other wizard." Ichigo yelled back, firing his Sero. Tensa Zangetsu easily dodged the incoming beam and gripped his sword. "You are making excuses, Ichigo." Once again, the two clashed blades, breaking apart and coming at each other time and again, striking and dodging and blocking, yet neither were landing a blow on the other. "You could have ended this war very early on if you'd just used a Garganta to get away from the wielder of Shinso and attacked Aizen from behind. So the thought didn't occur to me, I can't think of everything. Ichigo fired a newly improved Getsuga, much smaller than before, but still larger than the one Tensa Zangetsu had retaliated with earlier. It rocketed towards Tensa Zangetsu with much improved speed, but the spirit merely dodged before continuing the assault on the wizard. You removed your mask against Jin. Tensa Zangetsu pressed, using Shunpo continually to create the illusion of dozens of himself around Ichigo, and as a result his voice seemed to come from all directions as well. The mask was overkill, Ichigo argued, straining his keen eye to figure out where Tensa Zangetsu was going to strike. Fuck it. Gripping his sword by the chain on the hilt, he quickly spun around in a circle on the spot 3 times, sending a spiral-shaped Getsuga in all directions. The Getsuga caught Tensa Zangetsu, but the spirit was prepared for such an event, easily deflecting the attack and firing a Getsuga back at Ichigo. There is no such thing as overkill when you have to finish quickly. Ichigo narrowly dodged, though it cut a slice through part of his Bankai coat on its way past. I thought you liked it when I fought every battle as an effort to improve my skills with you. I also told you I'm a practical man. It is practical to blow through all your enemies when your family and your life is on the line. Tensa Zangetsu scolded as he continued to press the attack towards his wielder. Ichigo met the attack unflinchingly, angrily blocking and deflecting the attacks and attempting to counter where he could. I had to hide my true power so it could surprise Aizen. Hide it. Aizen knew you had hollow powers, just as he knew that your body transformed into a hollow when Cazador de la Luna was in control. Of course he would know that you would evolve that way. It would have been a far better surprise to use Sero to eradicate his head or his heart from a distance. Ichigo screamed in fury as the fusion of his Zanpakuto and his hollow systematically tore down every one of his arguments with cold hard logic to bring out the ugly truth. Firing another Getsuga, which put some distance between them, Ichigo glared at the manifestation of his powers with all the anger he could muster. Fine, I don't like my hollow powers. And why is that, Ichigo? Tensa Zangetsu demanded. Because a hollow killed my mother, another almost killed the rest of my family, and hollows always go after loved ones first before attacking anyone who can feed them. I don't want to be a hollow because I don't want to be a danger to my family, I don't want to always hunger for souls, I don't want to be a monster. There it was. The truth about Ichigo's feelings, raw and out in the open. What makes a person a monster? The question caught Ichigo flat-footed. He'd just finished spilling his heart out, and Tensa Zangetsu's calm, non-accusing tone came as a complete surprise. He'd expected an angry retort about how hollows are not monsters but victims, possibly using Cazador de la Luna's voice. Hearing an explanation about why he was not a monster was also not out of the question. But this, well, a monster is someone who does terrible things because he enjoys it. Do you do terrible things because you enjoy it? Of course not, Ichigo replied, slightly hurt that Tensa Zangetsu had to ask. Then by your own words, you are not a monster. What difference, then, does being hollow make? That's the question, isn't it? Now that he'd admitted his feelings aloud, it seemed easier for Ichigo to think about the possibility with something resembling rational thought. Even if Tensa Zangetsu didn't say it, Ichigo could feel that the spirit was not judging him, but forcing him to accept his feelings and move on, always looking forward. Ichigo lowered his sword, a pensive frown on his face as he wrestled with his emotions. If he was indeed a hollow, if Ichigo was actually both hollow and Shinigami, and not just a Shinigami with hollow powers, would knowing that make any difference now, if he'd been that way for this long? If he'd already been unknowingly drawing on his hollow side for most of his life, and more obviously recently? How would the knowledge of the truth affect who he was? More and more, the answer seemed to be obvious. I am hollow, Ichigo murmured hesitantly. I am hollow, and I am Shinigami, he said again, more strongly, though with a tinge of sadness. The truth is a terrible thing, Ichigo thought to himself morosely. To gain the power inborn in truth, I had to sacrifice the happy innocence of ignorance. Tensa Zangetsu smiled before splitting back into his separate halves. You are wizard. And for the first time, Ichigo truly understood what those 3 words meant. It meant that he was Shinigami and hollow, with all the benefits and downsides that came with it. Ichigo would have the powers of Bankai and Resurrection, of Getsuga and Sero. His Shinigami side would cover up his hollow hunger, his hollow side increased the potency of his Reiatsu beyond that of Shinigami capabilities. In trade, Ichigo would always be watched, held at arm's length by those who were either Shinigami or hollow, but not both. The Gote 13 would always fear that he'd snap and attack them as a hollow. Hueco Mundo would always fear that he'd go on a killing spree and purify them all as a Shinigami. And you know what? As long as I can protect those I care for, as long as I can have my close friends support me, I can live with that. You good, King? Ichigo smirked at his hollow reflection. Yeah, I'm good. Abandon your fear. Look forward, Tensa Zangetsu ordered firmly. Cazador de la Luna gave an identical smirk back. Move forward and never stop. You'll age if you pull back. You'll die if you hesitate. Ichigo finished, the words having been engraved in his heart since they'd been spoken all that time ago, when he met Zangetsu on the day he'd regained his powers in Urahara's basement. Now, Ichigo, call me out. Ichigo's Reiatsu flared high into the sky as he called forth his Ijuka's mask and materialized his hollow Zanpakuto. Blacken the night, Cazador de la Luna. The double Getsuga Tensho attack that Kurosaki Isshin and Ichigo had performed together created a column of Reiatsu that reached high into the heavens and churned rocks and dust from the earth, equally divided down the middle, Isshin's blue-white Getsuga against Ichigo's obsidian and crimson, with Aizen in the middle and hopefully being devastated by the two-sided assault. Both father and son jumped back, again in stereo, as they waited for the attack to die down. After several seconds more, the Getsugas both fell unstable and exploded, and the resulting blast of wind blew past the unmoving Kurosakis and Urahara. When the dust cleared, to Isshin's satisfaction, Aizen had been injured, especially on the side that Ichigo had attacked from. This came as no surprise to the father, as Aizen's Reiatsu was impossible to read for him. Aizen had evolved away from that of a Shinigami. Ichigo, who was well on his way to evolving as well, naturally had a better chance of affecting him. Getsuga Tensho, I understand that attack now, Aizen stated loud enough for everyone to hear him as the Hogyoku began to heal his wounds. But now it is time for you all to understand my power. Unseen by anyone, within the darkness of Ichigo's mosque's eye holes, two amber eyes opened. He was awake. You understand the Getsuga Tensho? He growled. What you need to understand, Aizen, is that you've pissed me off. Aizen spun in shock, only to find Tensa Zangetsu lunging for the throat, covered in a Getsuga that promised to take his head off. He ducked down, only to realize that Ichigo had apparently anticipated that and charged a tri-focused Sero at his fingers, aimed right for Aizen's head. Oh, that's just not Sero. Aizen managed to bring Kyoka Suigetsu up to help hold it off, but he was pushed back, hard, into the ground over 100 feet down. But while the smoke had yet to clear, Ichigo lowered his horns and fired another two Seros, as powerful as he could make them, at Aizen, then followed it up with a Getsuga Tensho with its power as compressed as he could make it on short notice. No such thing as overkill, Tensa Zangetsu. Ichigo, overkill much. Apparently it was the wizard's turn to be surprised, because Ichigo was completely taken aback when he saw his father dressed up in Shinigami robes with a Taicho's Haorion tied to his shoulder. Dad. Urahara was barely able to hold back a snort of laughter. Ichigo had become the scariest combination of Shinigami and Hollow he'd ever seen, and to see that monstrous form's body language give off shock at seeing its completely Shinigami father tickled his sense of humor perfectly. Listen, I know you've got questions, Ichigo, but save it. You're here. Aizen's probably still alive, you can explain when he's dead. Ichigo told him. But, unless something really bad is going to happen in the next few seconds, shut up and fight. Yamamoto's going to torch this entire fake town within the minute using a trap designed to incinerate everyone in it, including Aizen no matter what illusion he spawns, Isshin explained in a matter-of-fact voice. Bad enough. There was a moment of silence. Okay, that qualifies as really bad. Let's get out of here. Yoruichi. Urahara called out. The goddess of Shunpo appeared the next instant next to him, wearing strange, thick white armor from her knees down and her elbows out to envelop her hands. Looks like Yamamoto Jii decided to take his turn. Time to leave. You got it. The pair of exiled Shinigami crouched down for a moment, then vanished at speeds of Shunpo that even Ichigo had trouble matching using his Jillian masked Bankai. What about my friends? The other Taicho are getting them. Ichigo, now hurry up and go. Reassured of his friend's safety, Ichigo channeled his Reiatsu and vanished into Shunpo himself. However, only Isshin heard a tiny sonic boom as well. Ichigo's Shunpo had been at least in small part a Sonido. The elder Kurosaki paused for a moment, looking down at where Aizen had impacted the ground and been barraged by Seros and Agetsuga just a few moments earlier. The shadowy figure of Aizen, obscured by the dust still settling, was getting up from the deep crater. Damn it! Yamamoto appeared next to him in a flicker of pure Shunpo, Ryujin Jaka drawn and an aura of fire around the aged Shinigami. The air suddenly seemed both hot and heavy, almost unbearably so. It was obvious that the Saotaicho was taking this battle extremely seriously. Kurosaki Isshin, I see that your son has regained his senses. Yeah, despite the man having been willing to kill his son just a few moments ago, Isshin didn't really want Yamamoto to die. He was a strong Shinigami, and while Yamamoto was a bit old-fashioned, he truly did have soul society's and the living world's best interests at heart. Isshin understood the predicament Yamamoto was in. Kill one man of questionable loyalty at best to destroy a threat that would happily kill thousands. The Saotaicho opened his eyes. Go, Isshin. If Aizen escapes my trap, then you will be needed. The younger Shinigami looked once at Yamamoto's expression, then nodded and flickered into Shunpo to follow his son. With that distraction out of the way, Yamamoto flared his Reiatsu so that Aizen would have no choice but to feel and see it. Reduce all creation to ash, Ryujin Jaka. It's time to spring this trap. Yamamoto Genryusai Shigekuni, came Aizen's voice as he rose from the debris where Ichigo had repeatedly struck him, the last traces of high-speed regeneration revealing itself by healing a gash across his chest. I'm surprised. If Ichigo-kun had kept up his assault, I'm not sure I would have survived. However, you have no chance. Oh, and how is that, Aizen Sosuke? Don't get me wrong. I recognize that you are extremely strong, Aizen went on. Master of the strongest fire-type Zanpakuto, Ryujin Jaka. In fact, in a one-on-one battle before my evolution, I would have lost, badly. And what makes you think that your evolution is enough to best me? Shall we see? Yamamoto swung his blade once and streams of fire leapt around the pair of them, apparently locking them inside a spherical prison of flame. There is no escape this time, Aizen. No negation, no espada, nothing shall allow you to evade my blade. Nothing. I propose your death will allow it simply enough. Aizen let out a small, knowing smile. HMPH, do you really think you can cut me down with only that much power? I already have. Yamamoto snarled angrily as he swung his fiery sword, flames lunging at Aizen, only for the image to shatter. Spinning around to counter, he was too late. Aizen's illusion-type Zanpakuto, Kyoka Suigetsu, entered Yamamoto's right lung with an almost surgical feel to it, as though Aizen were being careful and going slow to ensure he was cutting the right spot. Yamamoto coughed up blood over Aizen's arm, but gripped it with his free hand. I have you now. Are you sure? Aizen suggested with another secretive smirk. How can you know if this is illusion or not? If I were relying on my skin, my ears or my eyes, I would be fooled by your Zanpakuto, Aizen Sosuke, but there is one sense you have not blocked. Yamamoto declared in his rumbling voice. I can sense Kyoka Suigetsu, and I know that I hold on to the real you. So what if you have? Aizen asked, conceding the point. Any damage you do to me will be regenerated by the Hogyoku, whereas you will die. Not if I destroy your entire soul right here, right now. Aizen snorted. There is no Kido for that, and you are no Quincy. No, but have you noticed any similarities between Ryujin Jaka and the Sokyoku? Yamamoto queried, coughing a little more blood onto his beard. Aizen's widening eyes showed the old Shinigami that he suddenly understood. Intense heat. Oh yes, the venerable Saotaicho agreed. Heat so intense, it will vaporize your soul faster than you can regenerate. But this amount of heat you have here isn't enough, Aizen protested, regaining his confidence quickly. True. Yamamoto tightened his grip while he dismissively gestured with Ryujin Jaka to release the fire prison, and release the trap he'd set up. Over a dozen pillars of fire erupted in various points of the fake Karakura town, and Yamamoto let loose a victorious grin that bared his teeth as he saw Aizen's rising panic. But I am master of the strongest fire-type Zanpakuto. Wunderweiss. Aizen summoned. Come to me. Yamamoto waited. He had expected Aizen to have some sort of plan to deal with him, but was confident he could handle anything the traitor could throw at him. But even he was somewhat surprised when nothing happened. Wunderweiss. It seems your backup plan has failed before it even had a chance to begin, Yamamoto judged. Aizen couldn't believe this was happening. He'd designed Wunderweiss's Resurrection, Extinguer, to be the perfect counter to Yamamoto's Ryujin Jaka. He'd known that Yamamoto would attempt to kill him with some overwhelming fire attack, and had planned to use Wunderweiss to not only stop it, but turn it against Yamamoto upon the modified Arrancar's inevitable demise. Calm down. Alright, let's assess the situation and make some options. Wunderweiss was most likely dead. Kyoka Suigetsu was still lodged in Yamamoto's chest, and his arm was being gripped too hard to move it and kill the old Saotaicho. Aizen couldn't see Jin anywhere, but figured that he was probably fighting someone at the moment, or busy escaping Yamamoto's trap. Ichigo was no longer berserk, so he couldn't be directed to cut through Yamamoto to attack Aizen. Tosen was likely dead as well. There was no one in the area besides himself and Yamamoto to use his hypnosis on. Yamamoto was too strong for most Kido. Aizen quickly ran through the list of Kido he knew, searching for a Bakudo strong enough to inhibit Yamamoto's Reiatsu or force him to release his grip, or a Hado powerful enough to take Yamamoto's head off. Several Bakudo that came to mind. One was Bakudo 79, Kuyo Shibari, but Aizen's proximity would mean that he too would be affected. Bakudo 63, Seijo Sabaku would have been more promising, if only it were a little more powerful. Yamamoto's pure brute strength would easily break it. Hakufuku, one of Hinamori Momo's specialties, was too weak to affect Yamamoto. Bakudo 99, Kin and Banken, which both physically and spiritually bound their victims, would have been ideal, but they required hand seals which were at the moment unavailable due to Yamamoto's unbreakable grip. Those would have been perfect. Hold on. Aizen began to smile. Bakudo 99, Banken. You bluff, Yamamoto snarled. You cannot complete that Kido without hand seals. Are you sure? First song. Shiryu. Spiritual fabric manifested behind Aizen and flew towards Yamamoto, quickly wrapping him up from the bottom up, leaving only his head and the arm that held Aizen alone. Yamamoto flared his Reiatsu as high as he could. Reduce all creation to ash, Ryujin Jaka. His loyal blade erupted into flames, burning the fabric, revealing the truth. If this were true spiritual sealing fabric, Aizen, then I would have far more difficulty releasing my Zanpakuto. Even if I could, my fire would have difficulty burning it. Your illusion is useless. I will not let you go. Shatter. Kyoka Suigetsu. The illusion shattered into so many pieces, shimmering in the air like painted glass as it fell away to reveal the truth. Aizen had not initiated the Bakudo. Aizen smiled again at Yamamoto. I knew that would not work against you, though it would have been nice if it had. But you have failed to notice something. And what is that? Aizen held up his free hand, which held a flickering, black, electric-looking sort of Kido. You gave me time to use this. Hado 90. Kurohitsugi. Black and purple lines quickly traced a tall box around Yamamoto, promptly filling the spaces between them with the darkness, obscuring all traces of Yamamoto save the arm that still gripped Aizen's arm like his life depended on it. Over a dozen spears, made of the same obsidian Reiatsu, also manifested onto the box before promptly spearing inside it. But then, the darkness shattered just as Aizen's illusion had moments ago, revealing Yamamoto. Aizen was unsurprised to see Yamamoto being berekested. He had focused most of the spears towards the torso to ensure the most damage, but he was shocked to see that the Saotaicho was barely injured. There were scratches here and there, granted, but it seemed that the Kido had done almost nothing. I am the oldest, most powerful Shinigami alive, Yamamoto growled, the flames of his Zanpakuto growing even stronger. I created the Shinigami Academy over 2,000 years ago. I have had centuries, eons to grow ever stronger. Do you think that you are the first upstart to progress so far as to come to blows with me? It will take stronger Kido than that to defeat me. It is time to end this. Enetsu Jigoku. The pillars of fire from earlier, which Aizen had nearly forgotten in his fervor to escape Yamamoto's grip, grew even brighter and taller before shooting flames at each other, creating a nigh inescapable barrier of fire that began closing in on them and growing hotter by the second. "Why are you doing this? You'll die too," Aizen exclaimed. "As loath as I am to admit it, I am growing weaker." "Slowly, yes, but it remains the truth. I would rather die ridding all the worlds of a threat, permanently, than die on my deathbed as I watch my subordinates fight for my position. In any case, I can no longer be sure that simply cutting off your head would be sufficient to kill you. With the Hogyoku, and my technique will destroy that nuisance as well." "Shoot to kill, Shinso." Yamamoto's head snapped to his left, and saw the former Taicho of the third squad lunging towards him, Shikai in hand as it lengthened at tremendous speed towards Yamamoto's skull. A split second later, Ryujin Jaka batted it away, towards Aizen in the hopes that Jin would accidentally kill the Hogyoku-infused Shinigami. However, Yamamoto was grimly unsurprised to see that Jin had snapped back his Shikai to dagger length before it could strike Aizen. "Aizen-san, allow me to assist." "Ah, thank you Jin, once you've freed me, the easiest way out of this technique should be to simply kill him." Yamamoto's scowl could have rivaled any of Kurosaki Ichigo's at that moment. He had two choices. Hold on to Aizen and defend himself as best he could from a difficult position. It would be very easy for Jin to simply shunpo to the side opposite his Zanpakuto and strike him from there, or he could let go of Aizen and work on surviving long enough for his Enetsu Jigoku to finish. The decision was obvious. Yamamoto quickly let go of his deadly opponent and pushed himself off of Kyoka Suigetsu. "Jin, for your traitorous actions, your punishment will be to perish with your precious master." "Sorry, Yamamoto Saotaicho," Aizen replied with a smile. But Jin was never here. Indeed, as the Saotaicho was looking at where Ichimaru Jin had been, he saw the shattered fragments of Aizen's illusion fall away. His expression murderous, Yamamoto lunged for Aizen, Ryujin Jaka's flames turning brighter as they took on a slightly more bluish tint in his rage. Despite the fires of hate and anger fueling his actions, Yamamoto did not forget to close his eyes and detect Aizen by way of spiritually sensing Kyoka Suigetsu. Behind his closed eyelids, the eyes glowed orange with the fire of his Reiatsu as he called his Enetsu Jigoku to continue. At his will, the ring of fire that had trapped Aizen and Yamamoto in the area pulsed, and as one shot flames across the ground. Sparks and smoldering ash peppered the air as the flames rose to consume the buildings. No longer was it safe to land anywhere. "Soon, my inferno will be complete. You will not escape from me, Aizen." Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment and subscribe, as well as checking out the author on fanfiction.net.